The land was fire. Arizona, in the year 1878, knew only extremes. It was a territory of jagged rock and thirsty dust, a place stretched taut between the iron will of new settlers and the ancient, stubborn blood of the Navajo. The high desert air was thin and sharp, carrying the scent of juniper and something older, something like oxidized iron, the smell of the red earth itself. This was a land that held grudges. She awoke to pain. It was not a gentle return. It was a violent pull from a deep, black water. Her first sensation was thirst, a throat so dry it felt cracked open, lined with sand. Her head throbbed with a dull, heavy beat. Her lips were split. When she tried to swallow, a small, pained noise escaped her. Her eyes opened, but the world was shadows. She was not outside. The air was close, smoky, smelling of animal hides, dried herbs, and the unfamiliar scent of human sweat that was not her own. She was in a hogan, a structure of earth and wood, windowless, with a single opening in the rounded roof above where a thin column of light pierced the gloom. She was not alone. He sat across the small, circular space, near a fire pit that held only dead, gray ash. He was perfectly still. He was not a shadow. He was the darkness itself. A man carved from the red rock of the canyons. His black hair was long, tied back with a simple leather thong. His skin was the color of rich copper. He wore buckskin leggings and a faded calico shirt, open at the chest, revealing the hard lines of his muscles. Evelyn tried to move, a gasp tearing at her raw throat as fire lanced through her side. She was injured. The man's stillness broke. He did not startle. He simply moved. He rose in one fluid motion, silent, and crossed the space. He was tall, broader than she had first thought. He knelt beside the pile of furs she lay upon. His face was hard. It was a map of loss. Stoic, impassive, but his eyes were not calm. They were black, and they burned with a cold fire, holding the memory of everything he had ever lost. Family, freedom, his tribe. "Water," she rasped. The word was barely a sound. For a moment, he did not react. He studied her, his gaze missing nothing. He saw the fine spun gold of her hair, now matted with dirt and blood. He saw the remnants of her dress, expensive linen torn and stained, unfit for this world. He saw the terror in her blue eyes. Tala Redhawk had found her 2 days prior, half dead beside a dry wash, miles from any known trail. He had tracked the smoke from the wagon attack, finding only ash, dead mules, and the bodies of the teamsters. This woman, however, had crawled. She had crawled until she collapsed. His first instinct had been simple. He should have killed her. She was one of them. She was the daughter of the railroad, the metal snake that poisoned the Deneta, his people's sacred land. He had seen the papers in her satchel before he discarded it. Maps of the proposed survey line that would cut through the heart of the canyons. She was a spy, or the spawn of spies. His people were starving, driven onto reservations, and this woman represented the hunger that had consumed them. But he had not killed her. An instinct, a whisper from the holy people, had stayed his hand. He had lifted her, surprised at her lightness, and carried her back to this hidden camp by the San Juan River, a place only the exiled knew. He had cleaned the gash on her temple and bound the wound in her side, packing it with yarrow and sacred herbs. He had done this while hating her. He reached for a water skin, uncorked it, and lifted her head with a rough, impersonal grip. The water was warm, metallic, but it was the most profound relief she had ever known. She drank greedily, spilling some down her chin, until he pulled it away. "Who are you?" His voice was a low rumble, the English words heavy with the accent of his own tongue. Evelyn coughed, the water stinging her throat. Evelyn Carter." Her mind was clearing, the fog of dehydration receding, replaced by the sharp edges of fear. "Where am I? What happened?" "The wagons were burned. he said flatly. He offered no comfort. You were alone. Memory returned to her. The meeting in Santa Fe, the men shouting, her father, Samuel Carter, his face pale with stress. He was a good man, an inspector for the Union Pacific West, but he was caught in a snare. There was corruption, money passing under tables, contracts promising land that was not theirs to take. She had found the ledgers. She had taken them, planning to expose the entire scheme, running not just with her father, but from the men who controlled him. And then the attack. It was not warriors, not like the man in front of her. It was white men, faces covered, firing with repeating rifles. They had known exactly which wagon to hit. They were silencing her. She looked at the man. He saved me, she thought, the realization stunning her. He had found her, brought her here, tended her wounds. Yet he looked at her as if she were a snake. You are the railroad, he stated. It was an accusation. My father, he is an inspector. We were surveying. She stopped. How could she explain? How could she describe the civilized, boardroom evil of men in suits to a man who lived in a house made of mud? You map the land, Tala said, his voice dropping. You cut the throat of the earth so your iron horse can pass. No, she whispered. It is not like that. I was running. Men tried to kill me. He watched her, his face unreadable. He did not believe her. Or perhaps he simply did not care. To him, it was one white man killing another. It was not his concern. The cultural divide was a canyon between them, vast and echoing. She was a woman of Boston, educated at Vassar, taught to debate philosophy and appreciate opera. He was a man of the earth, a son of the Red Desert, his university, the wind and the stone. She was civilization. He was the savage she'd been warned about all her life. Tala stood and moved back to the far side of the hogan, sitting again, cross-legged, picking up a piece of wood he had been carving. He was making a small bird, a hawk, its wings spread. His hands, though calloused and scarred, moved with an artist's grace. She was left alone with her fear and the pulsing of her wounds. The silence in the hogan was thick, broken only by the sound of his knife scraping the wood. Hours passed. The light from the smoke hole shifted, turning from white to gold, then to a deep, bruised purple. Night was coming. With it, the desert temperature plummeted. A chill entered the small dwelling. Evelyn shivered, pulling the stiff buffalo hide tighter around her. And then she heard it. A sound, distant at first, carried on the cooling wind. A drum, a steady, rhythmic heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. Then another joined it, and a third. A chant began, a high, ululating cry that seemed to pull at the very stars. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. This was real. This was the wildness she had only read about. The stories of captured women, of scalps, of rituals she could not imagine. The smell of juniper smoke was stronger now, drifting in from outside. They were not alone in this camp. She looked at Tala. The moonlight now fell through the smoke hole, painting a silver stripe across the floor. The drums seemed to energize him. His carving stopped. He sat straighter, listening. He was a man plugged into the rhythm of the world she had just discovered. The drumming, the moonlight, the smoky air. It terrified her, but beneath the terror, faint and shameful, was something else. A pull, an attraction to the raw, unfiltered reality of it. The man across from her was part of it. He was dangerous, yes, but he was also elemental. He was true. He saw her watching him. His eyes met hers in the gloom. The fire was still there. The deep, settled grief of a man who had watched his world burn. He had lost everything. He was an exile, a warrior with no war left to fight, or perhaps a war he could never win. Evelyn knew she had to leave. She could not stay here. She was a burden, a prisoner, an enemy. I am stronger now, she lied, her voice trembling slightly. "If you could just let me rest, just for tonight." She saw his brow furrow. He was considering it. "Just one night," she repeated, the words desperate. "To heal. In the morning, you can show me the way to the fort, or just let me go." Tala looked at her for a long time. This woman was trouble. She brought the thunder of the white world to his quiet place of exile. She was weak, yet she had survived the desert for 2 days. She was educated, yet she knew nothing. He had promised himself he would feel nothing for her kind ever again. He had promised his ancestors he would protect this land. And here, in his own Hogan, lay the very thing he swore to destroy. But he was also a man, and she was a woman, alone and wounded. He gave a single, curt nod. It was barely a movement, but it was an agreement. Evelyn let out a breath she did not know she was holding. "Thank you." He did not reply. He turned his attention back to the carving. But the bargain was sealed. One night, that was all she asked for. That was all he would give. The drums beat on. The moonlight shifted. And in the space between the wounded woman from the east and the exiled warrior of the west, something was lit. It was not trust. It was not kindness. It was a spark, small and dangerous. Sow a seed in the dry tinder of 2 worlds that were destined to collide. It was a thing that, once started, neither of them would be able to extinguish. The drums were gone. Evelyn awoke to the smell of something savory, a thin broth of wild herbs and perhaps rabbit. The man, Tala Redhawk, was by the central fire pit, which now held a small, efficient blaze. The light from the smoke hole above was a clean, sharp white. It was morning. He did not look at her when she stirred. He used a long stick to push a shallow wooden bowl of the broth toward the furs where she lay. It was a gesture devoid of kindness, the simple act of feeding a stray animal. Evelyn pushed herself up, biting back a gasp as the muscles in her side screamed in protest. She felt weak, but the dehydration was gone, replaced by a dull, throbbing headache. She was stiff, sore, and covered in a fine layer of red dust. She reached for the bowl, her hand shaking slightly from weakness. As she did, the column of morning light struck her hand, illuminating the gold ring on her finger. It had been her mother's, a simple band with a small diamond, but her father had insisted on adding an engraving to the setting. Tala, who had turned his attention back to the fire, went perfectly still. His gaze, previously indifferent, snapped to her hand. He dropped the stick. In 2 silent, fluid strides, he was across the Hogan. He seized her wrist. His grip was not gentle. It was steel. Evelyn cried out, the hot broth spilling over her hand and onto the furs. "Where?" he snarled, the word a low, dangerous vibration. "Did you get this?" He was not looking at the diamond. He was looking at the insignia carved deep into the gold band, an image she had seen 1,000 times. 2 iron rails crossing a stylized mountain peak, the official mark of the Union Pacific West. "It was my mother's," she stammered, her heart hammering against her ribs. The sudden violence terrified her. "My father, it was a gift from him." "Liar!" He released her wrist, shoving her hand away as if it were a venomous snake. His face, once an impassive mask, was now alive with a cold, pure hatred. "This is the brand, the snake's eye. This is the mark of the men who drove my people from the Chuska Mountains, the mark of the men who pay for the rifles that kill our women and children." His anger was a physical presence. It filled the small, earthy space, sucking the air from her lungs. He saw the ring not as a piece of jewelry, but as a symbol of every broken treaty, every stolen acre, every drop of blood spilled onto the land. "You are a spy," he said, his voice flat and heavy with certainty. "You came to measure the bones of our ancestors." "No," Evelyn insisted, tears of frustration and fear stinging her eyes. She tried to pull herself upright, to face him. "You do not understand. I am trying to stop them." He laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound, as dry as the desert floor. A white woman stops the railroad. The river does not stop the flood. It only carries it faster. "My father," she said, her voice gaining a desperate, ragged strength. "His name is Samuel Carter. He is an inspector for the company. He is a good man, but he is trapped. They are forcing him." The words began to pour out of her. The story of the backroom deals in Santa Fe, of the falsified ledgers she had found in her father's locked desk, of the corruption that went all the way to Washington. "They want him to sign a new treaty, a document that gives them the right to build the new line through—" She paused, the name from the map clear in her memory. "Through the Canyon de Chelly." They told him it was unoccupied. But the map, it showed it was sacred land. Tala's expression darkened. The Canyon de Chelly, the Zei. It was the heart of the Dineta, the place of the holy people. His anger, which had been hot, cooled into something far more dangerous. He looked at her as if she were the living embodiment of all the lies his people had been forced to swallow. "You," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "are the paper. You are the lie." "I am not," she cried. "I took the proof. I stole the ledgers. I was running away to take them to a journalist in California. That is why they attacked the wagons. It was not warriors. It was white men, dressed as civilians. They wanted the ledgers back. They were sent to kill me." Tala watched her, his black eyes searching her face. Her story was complex. It was convoluted. It almost sounded true. A lie would have been simpler. "Who led them?" he asked, the question sharp as flint. "A man. They called him Major. He had a scar. Here." She drew a trembling line across her own cheek, from her eye to her jaw. He wore a cavalry coat, but it was not army issue. He was shouting orders. A man named Craven, Major Craven. The name landed between them like a dropped stone. The air in the Hogan shifted. Tala's entire posture changed. The focused hatred he held for her did not vanish, but it was suddenly eclipsed by something older, deeper, and brutally personal. "Craven!" The mercenary, the butcher of Sand Creek, the man who now led a private army for the railroad, the man who led the raids on the reservations, selling stolen Navajo blankets and silver back to the very settlers he was paid to protect. Craven was Tala's personal ghost. He was the man who had led the patrol that had... He forced the memory down, locking it away. This woman was no longer just a symbol. She was not just the daughter of the railroad. She was a tool, perhaps, but she was also the enemy of his enemy. He turned away from her. The muscles in his back knotted. A storm raged inside him, mirroring the one he could feel brewing in the air outside. The path, once clear, was now forked. He was an exile, but he was still dying. His duty was to his people. This woman was poison. He should take her horse, ride her to the edge of the reservation lands, and leave her for the soldiers at Fort Defiance to find. They would believe her story, or they would not. It was not his concern. Perhaps trading her, the daughter of a railroad inspector, would buy him passage back to his clan, an act of goodwill. Or he could protect her. He could use her knowledge, use her stolen papers, to find Craven. He could use her to stop the railroad, to protect the sacred canyon, but to do that, he would have to defy the very laws of the Dineta that he sought to defend. To shelter the enemy, to aid one of the Bilagana, was a betrayal of his ancestors. He was trapped between his duty and his blood. He looked back at her, this pale, wounded woman who had brought the war of her world to his hidden doorstep. As if summoned by his inner turmoil, the world outside answered. A low moan began, a sound that seemed to come from the earth itself. The wind, it had been still all morning, the air heavy and oppressive. Now, it began to move. The light in the smoke hole dimmed, the clean white turning to a sickly, churning yellow. Tala moved to the Hogan's entrance flap and pulled it back. The sky was gone. It had been replaced by a solid, moving wall of red dust. a churning cloud of sand and grit that rose thousands of feet into the air. It was moving fast, a sandstorm. Not a small dust devil, but a true monster of the high desert, a storm that could strip paint from wood and flesh from bone in minutes. He dropped the flap, the wind tearing at it with a sudden, violent shriek. He quickly grabbed a heavy log from beside the fire and braced it against the hide covering. The sound was instantly deafening. It was not a whistle. It was a roar. The sound of a giant animal trying to claw its way in. Fine silt began to pour through the smoke hole, raining down on the small fire, causing it to hiss and sputter. The very walls of the hogan, made of packed earth and juniper logs, began to creak and groan under the pressure. "What is it?" Evelyn cried, pulling the rough fur hide over her mouth as she began to cough. "The wind!" he shouted over the din. "The Nietzsche! We stay! We wait!" The one night she had bargained for was here, and the desert itself was locking them in. The light vanished completely. They were plunged into a terrifying, suffocating darkness. The only illumination, the dying, smoky embers of the fire. The roar was constant, a physical weight pressing in on them. The world was reduced to this small, shaking, circular room. Hours passed. They did not speak. There was nothing to say that the wind was not saying louder. They were two people, separated by an ocean of culture and history, huddled in the dark, breathing dust. Evelyn's terror of him was slowly being replaced by a more immediate, primal terror of the world outside. She was cold. Her side ached with every breath. The dust filled her lungs, making her cough, a dry, painful hack that felt like tearing. In the blackness, her mind, feverish and frightened, began to drift. She began to speak, her voice small, almost conversational, as if she were talking to herself simply to prove she was still alive. "I had a dream," she whispered, the words barely audible. "Before the attack, I dreamed I was lost in this red place, and a warrior found me." Tala remained silent, a shadow against the far wall. He was listening, not just to her, but to the groaning of the log roof. "But there was an eagle, too," she continued, her voice dreamy and thin. "A great, red-tailed eagle. It flew above him. And I was afraid. I was afraid the eagle would strike me, but it landed on the warrior's arm. And I knew they were the same, the man and the bird." Tala stiffened in the dark. In his culture, the eagle was a messenger, a sacred being, a connection to the holy people. It represented power, vision, and fierce protection. For this white woman to dream such a thing, it was a powerful omen. It was a sign of forbidden paths, of a destiny he did not want. She coughed again, a racking spasm that made her cry out in pain. She slumped back against the firs, her breathing shallow and ragged. The storm seemed to find a new, terrible fury. A gust hit the hogan like a solid fist, and the sound of splintering wood echoed from above. The heavy log bracing the door flap groaned and scraped against the dirt floor. He moved. She did not see him in the dark, but she felt the air shift. He was suddenly beside her. She flinched, pulling away, but his hand found her. It was not violent. It rested on her wrist, his thumb pressing lightly against the delicate skin of her inner arm, feeling the frantic, fluttering beat of her pulse. It was the first touch. Not the rough, impersonal grip of a savior pulling her from the sand. Not the angry, violating grasp of an accuser. This was different. It was the simple, warm, living contact of a man's hand on a woman's skin. It sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with fear. It was a spark of heat in the cold, dusty dark. His thumb was calloused, rough as bark, but the touch itself was searching, inquisitive. He was checking her life, her pulse, her strength, and in that clinical, detached assessment, a yearning he had buried under years of grief and exile stirred. He could feel the fine bones of her wrist, the fragility of this woman, and yet she had dreamed of the eagle. A terrible crash echoed directly overhead. A section of the roof, weakened by the relentless wind, gave way. Dirt, sticks, and a fresh torrent of stinging sand poured into the hogan. The wind screamed through the new opening, a banshee's wail. Evelyn screamed. It was a raw, primal sound of pure panic. This was not Boston. This was not civilization. This was the end of the world. By pure, unthinking instinct, she moved. She lunged from the firs, scrambling away from the falling debris, and collided hard with his chest. She did not think. She reacted. She grabbed onto him, her hands fisting in the rough cotton of his shirt, clinging to him as the only solid, unmoving thing in a world that was dissolving into noise and sand. She pressed her face against his shoulder, her body shaking uncontrollably. Tala's entire body went rigid. His first instinct was to throw her off. She was the enemy. She was the lie. She was the mark of the snake. But her hands were desperate. Her trembles were real. She was not a symbol. She was a woman, terrified and in pain, and she smelled of something faint and civilized, like lavender, now buried under dust and fear. The wind howled, a symphony of destruction. He hesitated for one long, stretched second. Then, slowly, his arms came up. He did not embrace her. He sheltered her. His hand rested on the back of her head, holding her steady against the assault. His other arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her tight against him, using his own body as a shield against the wind and the stinging grit. She felt the solid, unyielding wall of his chest. She felt the steady, slow beat of his heart beneath her ear, a strong, grounding counter-rhythm to the chaos of the storm. He leaned down, his lips brushing the shell of her ear as he spoke, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her entire body. "Just one night," he whispered, the words both a promise and a curse. "Woman of the wind." She clung to him, her breath catching in her throat. The terror of the storm was still there, but it was joined by a new, more profound, and infinitely more dangerous feeling. The feeling of his arms around her, the feeling of his strength. She was in his bed, in his home, in his arms, and in that single desperate moment, born of sand and wind and fear, Evelyn Carter branded his heart. It was a mark burned onto him, unseen and unspoken, but as permanent as the red rocks of the canyon, and it would remain there. Forever. The silence of the morning was heavier than the storm. The wind was gone, leaving a stillness that felt unnatural, the air cold and sharp with the scent of wet dust. Evelyn awoke stiff and sore. The adrenaline of the night faded. She was no longer pressed against Tala. He was across the hogan, his back to her, repacking a small leather satchel. The intimacy of their shared terror had vanished with the darkness. He was once again a stranger, his face a hard mask. The roof of the hogan had a large, gaping hole in it. The floor was littered with debris and a thick carpet of red sand. The one night she had bargained for was over. He moved to the entrance flap, his movements economical and silent, and looked out. Evelyn pulled the furs around her, her body aching. She knew she had to leave. He had saved her, but she was his enemy, a burden. It is morning," she said, her voice a dry croak. "The storm has passed." Tala grunted, his attention fixed on the world outside. "The storm passed. The trouble has not." He turned, his black eyes flat. "Stay here. Do not make a sound." Before she could ask why, she heard it. It was not the organic sound of the desert. It was the jingle of harness, the heavy tread of shod horses, and the low murmur of men speaking English. Evelyn's heart leaped. "Soldiers," she whispered, scrambling to her feet, ignoring the pain in her side. "It is my father. They are looking for me. We are safe." She stumbled toward the entrance flap. Tala's arm shot out, barring her way. His grip on her bicep was iron. "Safe," he hissed. "You are a fool. They are not here to save. They are here to hunt." "They are my people. Let me go." She tried to push past him. "Your people," he said, pulling her back into the shadows. are the ones who sent Craven." "That is not true. They are the army." Through the gap in the entrance, she saw them. 4 men in dusty blue coats, their rifles held ready. They were fanned out, surveying the small, hidden camp. One, a young lieutenant with a clean-shaven face, pointed toward the damaged hogan. "There," he called out. "I see tracks, and the roof is damaged. Someone is here." Evelyn's relief was so profound she almost wept. She wrenched her arm free from Tala's grasp and stumbled out into the pale, clean morning. Her hands raised. "Wait, please," she called out, her voice cracking. "I am Evelyn Carter, my wagon train. We were attacked." The 4 soldiers stopped. The lieutenant stared, his eyes wide. He saw a woman in the tattered remains of a fine dress, her hair wild and matted with blood and red dust. She looked like a captive, driven half-mad. "Miss Carter," the lieutenant said, his voice cautious. He dismounted. "We received a report you were taken, kidnapped by a renegade Navajo." His eyes flickered past her, into the darkness of the hogan behind. "Is he in there, ma'am? Are you safe?" "Yes," Evelyn said, breathing heavily. "He is in there, but you do not understand. He did not kidnap me. He saved me. The wagons, they were burned, and the storm—" "He saved you." The lieutenant's expression hardened. He drew his pistol. "A likely story. We have a report this man, Tala Redhawk, was seen near the massacre. He is wanted for murder. Stand aside, Miss Carter." "No, you are wrong. He is not a murderer," she pleaded, but her words were weak. "Corporal, check the dwelling," the lieutenant ordered. A rough-looking soldier with a thick beard stepped past Evelyn, shoving her aside. "Come on out of there, Injun!" he yelled. "Hands high." Tala emerged from the shadows. He moved with a slow, deliberate grace, his hands empty, held slightly away from his body. His face was a stone carving of contempt. "That is him," the lieutenant said, his pistol steady. "Tala Redhawk, exiled from his own people, a known killer." "He saved my life," Evelyn cried again, her voice desperate. "He will hang for what he did, ma'am," the lieutenant said, his tone patronizing, as if speaking to a hysterical child. "We will get you back to your father. Corporal, secure the prisoner." The corporal holstered his rifle and pulled a length of rope from his belt. He advanced on Tala, who had not moved. "Hands behind your back, renegade." Tala said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the corporal. "I said, move it." The corporal shoved Tala hard in the chest. It happened in the space between one breath and the next. Tala did not resist the shove. He used the momentum, flowing forward. He grabbed the corporal's extended arm with one hand and his knife belt with the other. He twisted, a blur of motion. The corporal's own skinning knife was suddenly in Tala's hand. The blade went up and in, under the corporal's ribs, a single, deep, economical thrust. The corporal's eyes went wide with a terrible, wet surprise. He made a small gasping sound and crumpled to his knees. "No!" Evelyn screamed. The lieutenant shouted, raising his pistol. The other 2 soldiers fumbled for their rifles. Tala did not hesitate. He grabbed Evelyn by the waist, yanking her backward, using her body as a momentary shield as he moved toward his horse. Still tethered near the hogan, a gunshot cracked, the bullet whining past Evelyn's ear and striking the mud wall. "Run! To the horse!" Tala yelled, shoving her forward. He ripped the dead corporal's pistol from its holster. He fired, not at the men. He fired at the soldiers' horses. A single shot aimed at the ground near their feet. The animals screamed, reared, and scattered, their reins tearing free. In the chaos, Tala leaped onto his Mustang's bare back. He grabbed Evelyn by the arm and hauled her up behind him. It was not gentle. Her wounded side flared in agony, and she cried out, clinging to his waist as the horse lunged into a gallop. "Hold on," he commanded. He kicked the Mustang into a run, not toward the open plains, but straight toward the narrow, winding mouth of a canyon. It was a place where horses had to run single file, a place where a pursuit was suicide. Evelyn looked back. The lieutenant was on his knees, pressing his hands to the corporal's chest, his face white with shock and rage. He looked up, saw them disappearing into the rocks, and raised his fist. "Murderer!" he screamed, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "You will hang for this. Both of you, traitor. You will hang." The word struck her like a physical blow. She was no longer Evelyn Carter, a victim to be rescued. In the eyes of her own people, she was now an accomplice, a traitor. They rode for hours, the horse breathing hard, its hooves striking sparks from the rock. Tala pushed them deep into the Donetta, into the sacred heart of the Navajo lands. The canyon walls rose around them, sheer and red, like the walls of a fortress. He was taking her to a place where the blue coats would not dare to follow. He finally slowed the horse in a hidden valley, a slash of impossible green where a small stream trickled between ancient cottonwood trees. It was a place that felt protected, silent and heavy with meaning. Tala slid from the horse. He was breathing hard, a dark stain of blood spreading on his sleeve where a bullet had grazed him. Evelyn's legs gave way as she slid down. She was shaking so violently she could barely stand. "You killed him! You killed that soldier!" "He would have killed me," Tala said, his voice flat. He ripped a piece of cloth from his own shirt and began to bind his arm. "And then he would have taken you, and his friends would have done what they wished. They do not see people. They see animals." "We must go back," she whispered, her mind reeling. "We can explain. It was self-defense." Tala looked at her, his eyes filled with a pity that was almost worse than his anger. Explain what? That a Belagana soldier is dead. They do not care why. They only care who. I am Navajo. I am a murderer. That is the law. And you." He looked at her, his gaze missing nothing. "You are with me. You are a traitor." The truth of it settled on her, cold and heavy. Figures emerged from the rocks, not with weapons, but with the slow, steady bearing of authority. They were old, 2 men and a woman, their faces landscapes of deep wrinkles, their silver and turquoise jewelry dull with age. They looked at Tala, and their eyes were filled with a profound sorrow. Then they looked at Evelyn, their faces hardened into stone. Tala spoke, his voice in his own language, fast and guttural. He was arguing, pleading, pointing back the way they had come. He used the name Craven. One of the old men, Hastin, stepped forward. He looked at Evelyn. "You bring this white woman here," he asked, his English broken but clear. "To the place where the holy people sleep, this is forbidden. She is not the enemy." Tala argued, switching to English so she would understand. "She carries knowledge of Craven. She is the key to stopping the railroad." "She is the railroad," Hastin said, his voice like rocks grinding together. "She is the daughter of the man who measures the land for the metal snake. She brings a bad omen. She brings the soldiers. She cannot stay." "The storm brought her to me. The wind," Tala said, his voice desperate. "The wind also brings the sickness that kills our children," the old man replied. He turned his gaze on Tala, and there was no pity in it. "You were an exile, Tala Redhawk, but you were still dying. You were still a warrior. By bringing this woman to this sacred ground, by spilling blood to protect her, you have broken the law of our ancestors. You are no longer one of us. You are Ana Ayi, an enemy." The words were a sentence of death. Evelyn saw Tala flinch, as if he had been struck. To be exiled was one thing. To be named Ana Ayi, it was to have his soul cut away. He was stripped of his name, his people, his very identity. "Then we will go," Tala said, his voice hollow. "Go north," Hastian said. "Go to the lands of the Ute. They are traitors. They do not care what blood you carry or what ghosts you have made, but do not return. The soldiers will come looking for the body you left. They will bring death to this valley. You have done this." Evelyn felt a sob rise in her throat. She stepped forward. "Please, it was not his fault. It was mine. I asked him for help." The old woman, Astza, who had been silent, spat on the dirt at Evelyn's feet. "He is a man," she said, her voice a dry rasp. "He chose. Now he lives with the ghost you gave him." The weight of her guilt was suffocating. He had been in exile, but he had still belonged. Now, because of her, he was nothing. He had lost everything. They left the sacred valley, riding north into the broken, hostile lands. They were truly alone now. Two outcasts, hunted by one world and rejected by the other. They were outlaws. The days bled into one another. The journey was a brutal education. Tala was silent for the first few days. Locked in a grief so deep Evelyn dared not speak to him. He treated her as a piece of cargo, a burden he was honor-bound to protect, but nothing more. But the desert demanded change. The woman from Vassar, the inspector's daughter, was stripped away, layer by layer. She learned. She had to. She learned to ride astride, not side saddle, her legs burning until they were numb, and then numb, they became strong. He taught her, his voice rough and impatient, how to find water, a seep in the rocks, the roots of a particular plant. He showed her how to set a snare, and she felt a wave of sickness and then a grim satisfaction when she caught her first rabbit. He gave her the dead corporal's pistol. It was heavy, oily. "You must use this," he said. "If I fall, you cannot hesitate. You will be dead, or worse than dead, before you can take 10 steps. He made her practice shooting at a tall saguaro, the sound of the gunshots echoing like cannon fire. She wept in frustration, her hands shaking, as she missed again and again. "Again," he commanded, his voice cold. She finally hit it, the bullet tearing a dark hole in the fleshy green. She felt no triumph, only a cold, hard knot forming in her stomach. He taught her words. He would point to water, chian, food, shash, bear, naatsi, danger. The bond between them changed. It was not a gentle unfolding. It was forged in necessity. The contempt he felt for her weakness faded as he saw her resilience. She did not complain. She did not weep. She learned. She was hard, in a way he had not known her people could be. Her fear of him, the savage killer, was replaced by understanding. She saw the way he moved, not as a man in the land, but as a man of the land. She saw the deep, abiding sadness in his eyes when he looked south, toward the home he could never see again. Trust began. One night, a mountain lion screamed, a sound like a woman being murdered. Evelyn awoke, her heart stopping, the heavy pistol in her hand. Tala was already awake, standing by the small, smokeless fire, a rifle in his hands. "It is only the cat," he said, his voice quiet in the darkness. "He is hunting, not us. Sleep." And she did. She closed her eyes, and she slept. It was not love. It was something more primal, a bond of shared exile. They were two people, pushed out by their worlds, existing only in relation to each other. After many days, they reached the edge of the Northern Territory, a trading post, a collection of miserable sod huts on the bank of the muddy San Juan River. It was a place for men who did not want to be found. "Wait here," Tala commanded. "Cover your hair. Do not speak to anyone." He took a small silver concha from his pouch and went inside to trade for bullets and dried food. Evelyn waited, pretending to check the horse's leg. Two prospectors stumbled out of the post, a bottle passing between them. They were reading a crumpled, week-old newspaper from Santa Fe. "Says here they finally caught that railroad man," one said, his voice a drunken slur. "The one whose daughter run off with that renegade." Evelyn froze. Her blood turned to ice. "Yeah," the other man said. That bastard Craven. Got him. Holding him down in Silver Mesa. Says he is keeping him for his own protection until the railroad pays a ransom. A security fee. He calls it holding him hostage. What about the girl, the daughter? Heard she is dead, or worse. Serves her right, if you ask me. Running with a killer. They laughed and staggered away. Toward the river. Her father, Samuel Carter, Craven, the man who had attacked her, who had left her for dead. He had her father. Tala came out of the post, his face grim. He had heard the same story inside. He looked at her, and he saw the terror in her eyes. But he also saw something else, a new light, a hard, cold fire that had not been there before. It was the fire of the desert. "We go north," he said, his voice low. "It is not our fight. It is your people's war." Evelyn shook her head. She pulled the corporal's pistol from her belt, checking the cylinder with a practiced, steady hand. The movement was no longer clumsy. "He is my father," she said. "He is a white man. His people will save him." Tala said. "His people," she said, her voice low and fierce, "are the ones who hired Craven. They will not save him. They will let him die. I am all he has." She looked up at him, her gaze unflinching. "You taught me how to ride. You taught me how to survive. You taught me how to use this." She held up the pistol. "I am going back. Silver Mesa is a fortress. Craven has 50 men. You will die," he said simply. "Then I will die," she replied, her voice quiet. "But I will not run. Not anymore." He studied her for a long moment. This was not the woman he had found by the dry wash. This was not the Billigana lady from Boston. This was someone else. This was a woman forged in the storm and tempered by the desert. This was the woman who had dreamed of the eagle. He had lost his people. He had lost his honor. He had lost his home. All he had left was this woman, this ghost he had pulled from the sand. He let out a long, weary breath. He looked south toward the red lands that had rejected him. "Silver Mesa is a death trap," he said again. "I know," she said. "You are a fool, woman of the wind." "I know that, too," she whispered. He nodded once, a single curt gesture of acceptance. "Then we ride south. We ride to save the man who builds the Iron Snake." The journey south was a descent into hell. They rode only by night, hiding during the brutal, sun-baked days in narrow canyons or under the sparse shade of mesquite trees. Silver Mesa was a name spoken in whispers, a boil on the skin of the territory. It was not a town. It was a sprawling camp of canvas, raw lumber, and vice, controlled completely by Major Craven and his private army of perhaps 50 mercenaries, all paid for by the Union Pacific West. Tala's demeanor had changed. The weary exile was gone, replaced by the warrior he had been. He was focused, sharp, and unforgiving. He pushed Evelyn past every limit she thought she had. The lessons were no longer about survival. They were about infiltration and killing. "You do not shoot to warn," he told her, his voice flat as he handed her the heavy pistol. They were hidden in a dry arroyo, the moon a cold silver coin overhead. "You do not shoot to wound. The men we face will not give you a second chance. You shoot for the heart. You shoot until they fall. Do you understand?" Yes," she said, her hands, once steady, now shaking slightly. This was different. "No," he said, taking her hand, forcing her fingers to grip the handle correctly. His touch was impersonal, the touch of a weapons master. "You do not understand. You are still the Boston lady. You think of mercy. There is no mercy in Silver Mesa. There is only the quick and the dead." He taught her to hide. He would vanish, melting into a patch of shadow only 10 feet away, and force her to find him. She learned to read the silence, to notice the unnatural stillness that meant a man was hiding. She learned to walk as he did, not on the heels, but on the ball of the foot, placing each step with care, flowing over the land instead of fighting it. They reached the bluffs overlooking the town after 5 days. Silver Mesa was worse than she had imagined. It was a scar of yellow light and noise in the pristine darkness of the desert. A constant frantic piano sound drifted up on the wind, mixed with shouts, gunfire, and the braying of mules. "How do we enter?" she whispered, looking at the armed guards posted at the edge of the camp. "They will see us." "They will see what they expect to see." Tala said he had a small pouch of dried walnut husks. He crushed them and mixed them with water, creating a dark, muddy paste. "Your skin, it is like new snow. It shines in the dark." He smeared the paste over her face, her neck, her hands. The stain was dark, making her look like a mestiza, a woman of mixed blood. He took the ribbon from her hair, mussing it, pulling it back into a simple, tight knot. He handed her a drab brown skirt and blouse he had taken from a settler's line 2 nights before. "We are husband and wife," he said, his voice flat. "We are laborers, come to find work. We are beneath notice. We are the dust." He did the same to his own face, not to darken it, but to change its planes, adding shadow and dirt to make him look tired and defeated, less like a warrior and more like a drifter. They walked into Silver Mesa, leading their weary horse. No one stopped them. The guards merely glanced at them, their eyes sliding past the 2 brown-skinned drifters, looking for bigger threats or richer targets. The town was a river of mud, men, and desperation. They needed a place to see, to plan. There was one 2-story wooden structure, a hotel called the Prospector's Rest. Tala pushed Evelyn inside, into a lobby thick with cigar smoke and the smell of stale whiskey. A bored man with a green visor sat behind the desk. He looked at Tala with open contempt. "We got no rooms for your kind. Try the livery." Tala placed a single, heavy silver concha on the desk. It was the last of his wealth. "My wife is sick," he said, his voice low and humble. "We need a room, just for 1 night." The clerk's eyes fixed on the silver. He weighed it in his hand, then slowly pushed a key across the desk. "Room 4, 2nd floor, front, and no trouble." The room was small, barely large enough for the iron bedstead and a cracked porcelain wash basin. The air was suffocating. The single window looked directly out over the main street, which led to the largest building in town, the Red Dog Saloon. That was Craven's headquarters. Tala stood at the window, a shadow in the dim light, watching the saloon. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress was thin, stained, and smelled of mildew. She was exhausted, but sleep was impossible. Night fell. The town did not get quieter. It got louder. The piano at the Red Dog began its frantic, pounding rhythm. Tala turned from the window. He had not spoken for an hour. "You must sleep. We will need our strength." Where will you sleep?" she asked, her voice small. He looked at the single, narrow bed, then at the dirty wooden floor. He could not sleep on the floor. He could not leave her unguarded, even for a moment. He needed to be able to move, to react. "We share," he said simply. He took off his knife belt, laying it on the small table next to the bed. Within easy reach, he kept the pistol tucked in his waistband. He lay down on top of the thin, dirty blanket, on the side of the bed nearest the door, his back to her. Evelyn's heart hammered. She was to lie next to this man, this warrior, this killer who had saved her life twice. Slowly, she lay down on the other side of the bed, facing the wall. She was still in her drab skirt, he in his dusty leggings. The bed was so narrow that their bodies, separated by only a few inches of dead space, were acutely aware of each other. She could feel the heat radiating from his back. She could smell the faint, animal scent of him, leather and sweat and the walnut paste he had used. She could hear every breath he took, slow and measured. This was not the desperate, frantic clinch in the storm. This was something else. A forced intimacy that was almost unbearable in its tension. She lay perfectly still, every nerve in her body screaming. She was pretending to be his wife. She was lying in his bed. Sleep did not come. They lay there in the dark, two living, breathing statues, listening to the pulse of the lawless town outside, and the much quieter, much more dangerous pulse of the person beside them. It was a shared bed, but it was not a shared rest. It was an agony of awareness. Just before dawn, he spoke, his voice a low rumble in the dark. "Craven is celebrating. They are starting the new survey line. He is throwing a party tonight, at the Red Dog." "How do you know?" she whispered. "The men talking in the street. He will be there. And your father, he will be the guest of honor." "A prisoner," she breathed. "A trophy," he corrected. "Craven will have him at his side, to show everyone that the railroad has bent to his will, that he controls the line." Evelyn turned, her head just visible in the gray light. "Then we must get in, tonight." "The saloon will be guarded. Only Craven's men and women will be allowed in." Evelyn looked at her reflection in the cracked, wavy mirror above the wash basin. She saw a gaunt, dark, stained face, her eyes wide with fear. "He will not expect me," she said, a new, cold resolve hardening her voice. "He thinks I am dead. He will not expect one of his women." Tala turned to face her. He understood immediately. "No, it is too dangerous. You are not one of them." "I am not," she said, sitting up. "But I can look like one. They will be watching for a man, a warrior. They will not be looking for a saloon girl." The plan was desperate. It was madness. And it was the only one they had. Tala would not be a guest. He would be a shadow. He would secure the horses, be in the alley behind the Red Dog. He would be the escape. Evelyn would be the infiltration. That day, Evelyn did the hardest thing she had ever done. She borrowed a dress from a clothesline behind the saloon, a gaudy, garish thing of scarlet satin with a low neckline and black lace. It was the armor for her new role. As night fell, she put it on. The Vassar graduate, the inspector's daughter, vanished. In her place was a woman of the frontier, her face painted with a small tin of rouge she had also acquired, her hair left loose and wild. Tala watched her, his face impassive, but his eyes burned. He had never seen her as a woman, not truly, only as a burden, a symbol, an ally. Now, in the red dress, she was fire, she was temptation, and she was walking into the lion's den. "He will see you," Tala said, his voice rough. "He will know you. He will see the dress," Evelyn replied, her voice shaking only slightly. "He will see the paint. He will not see me, not until it is too late." He handed her a small, sharp knife. "Hide this, if he touches you." "I know," she said, tucking it into the bodice of her dress. They moved. Tala slipped out of the hotel and melted into the alleys, a ghost in the rowdy darkness. Evelyn walked through the front doors of the Red Dog saloon. The heat and the noise hit her like a wall. Smoke, whiskey, sweat, and cheap perfume. A tinny piano was being hammered. A frantic drum beat against a backdrop of shouting men. The room was packed with mercenaries, prospectors, and gaudily dressed women. And at a large table at the back, she saw him. Major Craven. He was huge, his scarred face flushed with whiskey, his cavalry coat unbuttoned. He was laughing, a bottle in one hand, and next to him, looking small, gray, and utterly broken, was her father, Samuel Carter. Evelyn's heart felt like it would burst from her chest. She had to move. She pushed her way through the crowd, her body rigid. A drunken mercenary grabbed her arm. "Well, hello, new girl. Where have you been hiding?" She smiled, a cold, brittle thing, and pulled her arm free. "Get me a whiskey. Cowboy, I am thirsty." She moved toward the stage, her eyes fixed on her father. She had to get him away from the table. toward the back door. From her place near the piano, she could see the alley window. It was dark, streaked with grime. She looked desperate for a sign. And she saw him. He was standing in the shadows of the alley, a dark shape against the opposite wall. He was not moving. He was just watching. His eyes met hers across the crowded, smoky room. In that single, silent look, the world stopped. The noise, the music, the drunken shouts, it all faded. There was only him, a point of stillness in the chaos, and her, a splash of desperate red. His gaze held her, steadying her. She saw his head give a single, almost imperceptible nod. Now, move! Her heart beat. A frantic, pounding rhythm seemed to sync with the pounding of the piano and with the silent, steady pulse of the man in the alley. She took a deep breath. She walked straight to Craven's table. "Major Craven," she said, her voice loud and slightly slurred. He looked up, his eyes bleary. "What is it?" "A message," she said, leaning in close, letting him smell the cheap perfume she had doused herself in. "From a friend. He is waiting for you by the back door." Craven grinned, looking her up and down. "A friend, eh? Well, I like friends." He did not recognize her. She turned to her father. "And you, Mr. Carter," she said, her voice sharp. "The Major says you are to come with me. He is tired of your sad face." Samuel Carter looked up. His eyes met hers. For a second, there was only blank confusion. Then, a spark of horrified recognition. "Evelyn," he breathed. "Shut up!" Craven snarled, his good humor vanishing. "If the girl says you move, you move." He shoved Samuel out of his chair. "Go on, take him. Get him out of my sight." Evelyn grabbed her father's arm. "This way!" She pulled him, stumbling, through the crowd, toward the back door. "That girl," Craven said, staring after her, the way she moved, the color of her hair under the paint. "Wait." He stood up, his chair crashing over. The scar on his face turned purple. "Wait, I know that," he suddenly bellowed, his voice cutting through the saloon. "It is her. It is Carter's daughter. Stop them." Evelyn slammed the back door open. Tala was there. 2 horses saddled and ready, his own Mustang behind them. "Go!" he shouted. He threw Evelyn onto one horse, her father scrambling up behind her. Tala vaulted onto his own. The alley door burst open. Mercenaries poured out, firing their pistols into the dark. A bullet splintered the wood frame by Evelyn's head. "Ride!" Tala screamed. He kicked his Mustang, and they plunged into the dark streets, the sound of shouts and gunfire erupting behind them. They galloped through the center of town, a waking nightmare. Men fired from doorways, not knowing who they were shooting at. Tala pushed his horse between them and the pursuit, turning in the saddle, firing the pistol he had taken from the soldier. He fired not at the men, but at the lanterns hanging over the street. The bullets shattered the glass, plunging the street into deeper darkness. They were almost clear. The open desert was just ahead. A rifle cracked from a second-story window. Evelyn heard a sound, a wet, heavy thud. She saw Tala grunt, his body lurching forward, almost falling from the saddle. "Tala!" she screamed. He stayed on the horse, kicking it harder. "Do not stop! Ride!" They cleared the town, thundering into the canyons, into the blessed, silent dark. They did not stop for an hour. They rode until the horses were lathered and shaking, until the sounds of pursuit were long gone. Finally, Tala slid from his horse and collapsed. "Father, the horses!" Evelyn commanded, her voice high and tight. Samuel Carter, shaking, dazed, did as he was told. Evelyn ran to Tala. He was lying on his side, his breathing shallow, his hand pressed to his shoulder. It was dark, but she could feel the wet, sticky heat of his blood. "He is hurt," her father whispered, his voice trembling. "Oh, God! Evelyn! What have we done?" "Be quiet," she ordered. She tore open Tala's shirt. Her fingers probed the wound. It was high on his left shoulder, a dark, pulsing hole. "Hold this," she said, ripping a piece of cloth from her own ruined scarlet dress. She pressed it into her father's hand and forced him to hold it against the wound. "Press hard." Tala's head lolled. He was conscious, but barely. Evelyn's hands were shaking, but this was not the first time. This was not the soldier. This was Tala. She took the small flask of whiskey from his belt. "This will hurt." She poured the raw alcohol onto the wound. Tala hissed, his whole body arching off the ground. A guttural cry ripped from his throat, but it had cleaned the wound of the dirty shirt fibers. She worked quickly, her hands covered in his blood. She packed the wound with more cloth, binding it tightly with strips torn from her dress. Her hands were clumsy, trembling, but she did not stop. She wrapped it again and again, creating a thick pressure bandage. He was alive. The bleeding was slowing. She sat back on her heels, her entire body shaking with the aftershock. She had saved him. The Vassar girl, the traitor, the saloon dancer. She had saved the warrior. She was crying, silent tears tracing paths through the walnut stain and the red paint on her face. He opened his eyes. They were cloudy with pain, but they were focused. He saw her, this painted, blood-stained woman weeping over him. He raised his right hand, his good hand, slowly. His calloused, rough fingers touched her cheek. He brushed away a tear, his thumb smearing the paint, the dirt, and the blood together. He breathed, his voice a low rasp. Taji, his name for her, the free heart. Evelyn leaned down. Her body moved on its own. This was not the desperate clutch in the storm. This was not passion. It was a confirmation. It was life, answering life. It was gratitude. So deep it ached. It was survival. She pressed her lips to his. It was brief, chaste, the taste of salt, blood, and whiskey. A kiss that sealed a new bargain, not of one night, but of one life. Samuel Carter was a ghost, huddled by the horses, his body shaking so hard his teeth chattered. He was a man of ledgers, of timetables, of civilized debate over brandy. He was not a man for this world of blood and screaming and red dresses soaked in whiskey. He watched his daughter, his Evelyn, her face a grotesque mask of sweat, paint, and another man's blood. And his mind, finally catching up to the nightmare, began to crack. Tala pushed himself up. A low groan forced from his chest as the raw wound in his shoulder pulled. His entire left side was a sheet of fire. "We cannot stay. The sun is rising. They will track us." "You cannot ride," Evelyn said, her voice high and tight. She was packing the last of the torn scarlet cloth into the wound. "You have lost too much blood." "I can ride," he said, his teeth clenched. He got to one knee. "But we cannot go north. They will expect that. We cannot go west. That is open desert. We go south." Evelyn stared, her hands frozen. "South back toward your lands." "It is the only way," he said, accepting her offered hand to pull him to his feet. "Craven's men will not follow deep into the Dinetta. Not at first. There are people. My old clan. They may still help me." Samuel Carter stumbled forward, his eyes wild. "Help alliances, are you mad? Girl, he is a wanted killer. We are fugitives. We must find the army, the real army, at Fort Defiance. We must explain what happened. They will listen to me. I am Samuel Carter." Tala looked at the older man, his face a mask of pained exhaustion. "The army is who hunts us. The lieutenant you met, his man is dead. He will say I murdered him. He will say she helped me." He looked at Evelyn. "They will hang me, and they will lock you in a cell. Or worse, you are a fool. Old man, if you think your name means anything here." The blunt, brutal truth settled over them. They were trapped. They were outlaws. Their only hope of survival was to flee to the very people who had already rejected Tala, to beg for sanctuary from a people his own had helped to destroy. The journey south was a slow descent into fever and memory. Tala rode, his body rigid in the saddle, swaying with every step of the Mustang. He was burning with fever. The bullet still lodged deep in his shoulder. Evelyn rode beside him, her gaze constantly shifting, watching his face, watching the horizon. Samuel Carter trailed behind them, a broken, silent man, muttering to himself, his world shattered. They were in the Dineta now, a land of towering red mesas and deep, secret canyons. Tala led them along paths that were not paths, across high ridges and through narrow, winding washes, his warrior's instinct guiding them even as the fever clouded his vision. On the second night, they had to stop. Tala slid from his horse, his legs buckling, and collapsed by a small, hidden spring. "He is burning," Evelyn whispered, pressing her hand to his forehead. The skin was dry and hot as a stone. Her father sat apart, his back against a juniper tree, his face buried in his hands. Evelyn worked, cleaning the wound as best she could with the last of the whiskey and fresh spring water. Tala's eyes were open, but he was not seeing the canyon. He was seeing the past. His voice was a low, rough rasp, the words meant for no one but the ghosts he saw in the darkness. "We passed Cotton Hill today, to the east." Evelyn's hand paused. "I saw it, a bare hill. It looked lonely." "My father hangs there," he said. The words were so quiet, so flat, she thought she had misheard him. "What?" "He does not hang," Tala corrected himself, his voice a dead monotone. He was reciting a story burned into his memory. "He was tied to a wagon wheel. The soldiers, they were celebrating a new treaty. This was many years ago, 10, perhaps 12 years. I was a boy. I watched from the rocks." Evelyn felt the air leave her lungs. She could not breathe. "They did not kill him quickly," he continued, his eyes fixed on the stars winking between the canyon walls. "And my mother, she was Bilagana, like you, hair like the sun. She was a captive, taken when she was a girl. But she loved my father. She was one of us." He swallowed. The movement pained. "When the soldiers came, they rescued her. They said she was saved from us. They took her back. I never saw her again. She fought them. She screamed my father's name." He turned his head, his fever-bright eyes finding hers in the gloom. "That is the railroad. Taji, that is the world your father builds. It is a world that hangs men on hills named for cotton and saves women who do not wish to be saved. It is a world of paper promises and real blood." Evelyn sat back on her heels, the bloody rag in her hand. The connection, the terrible, brutal symmetry of it, struck her like a physical blow. Her entire life, her education at Vassar, her fine clothes, her comfortable world in Boston, it was all built on the bones of his family. Her father, the good man, the inspector, the man of civilization, was just a small, respectable part of the great iron machine that had done this. And she, Evelyn Carter, daughter of the railroad, loved the son of the man who hung on Cotton Hill. She loved the son of the woman who had been saved by her people. Their love was not just forbidden by law or custom. It was a historical impossibility. It was the direct antithesis of the war their two peoples had been fighting for 100 years. It was a bridge of flesh and blood built across an uncrossable, echoing canyon. Samuel Carter had been listening. The fevered words, the terrible story. It pierced the fog of his shock. He saw his daughter, his Evelyn, her face soft with a tenderness he had never seen, as she cradled the head of the wounded savage. He saw the way she looked at him, and the broken man found a new, terrible strength. "Evelyn," he said, his voice sharp, acidic. She looked up, startled. "Get away from him," Samuel commanded. Scrambling to his feet, He was shaking, but this time with a righteous, paternal rage. "Have you lost your mind, your morals? This man is a killer, a renegade. He is wanted for the murder of a United States soldier."
"Father, he saved us. He saved me,"
she pleaded, her voice low.
"He saved you," Samuel's voice cracked, rising to a shout. "He has damned you. Look at you. Just look at you. You are dressed like a saloon harlot, covered in filth and blood. You are my daughter. You are a Carter. You will not shame yourself. Shame your sainted mother's memory by crawling in the dirt with this.
"Do not say it," Evelyn warned, her voice flat and dangerous.
"Savage,"
Samuel spat the word. "He is using you. He has poisoned your mind with his stories. We are turning around. We are going to Fort Defiance. We will turn ourselves in. We will tell them the truth. They will listen to me." Tala, who had been silent, his eyes closed, pushed himself up onto one elbow. The movement cost him, his face going pale, but his voice was clear. "They will listen," he said, his words weak but sharp as flint. "And then they will hang me, and they will lock her away in a prison or an asylum. You are a fool, old man." "Better an asylum than this," Samuel raged, pointing a trembling finger at them. "I forbid this. Do you hear me? Evelyn, I forbid you to see him. I forbid you to touch him. It is an abomination in the eyes of God and man." The canyon was silent. It was the collision. The love for her father, the man who had raised her, protected her. The love for this warrior, the man who had seen her, who had saved her soul, and the honor of both men, clashing like flint and steel under the cold desert stars. Evelyn looked at her father, his face contorted with fear and disgust. "You do not understand. Father, you were a prisoner in Silver Mesa, but I was lost long before that. He found me. I am with him." "No," Samuel whispered, the word a plea, a denial. "No, you cannot be. He is red." "We rest," Tala commanded, his voice suddenly weak. He lay back down, his body trembling with the effort. He closed his eyes, but the damage was done. The line had been drawn in the red sand. That night, Evelyn did not sleep. She sat by the small, smokeless fire, her gaze shifting between the two men. Her father, on the other side of the flames, wept silently into his hands. Tala, she thought, was asleep, his breathing heavy and ragged with fever. She was torn. Her father was broken. Her lover was wounded. And she was the rock upon which both their lives were shattering. Just before the false dawn, when the darkness was at its thickest and coldest, she heard a sound, a pebble skittering on the rock. She looked up. Tala was gone. "Tala," she whispered. The space where he had been lying was empty. "No," she breathed, a cold panic seizing her heart. "No, he cannot." She scrambled to her feet, her legs stiff. "No!" She ran to where the horses were tethered. His Mustang was gone. He had left. He had left her. While she sat watch, he had slipped away. He had heard her father. He had seen the impossible choice he was forcing her to make. He had chosen for her. He had removed himself from the equation, leaving her to return to her world, to her father, to civilization. She sank to her knees, the dust cold beneath her. A terrible, hollow emptiness opened inside her, a void darker and colder than the night. He was wounded. He was burning with fever. He would ride until he fell. He would die alone in the desert. Then she saw it. Lying on her saddle, coiled neatly, was a simple leather thong. It held a single, heavy piece of silver. It was not a cross. It was not a bead. It was an old, battered pendant, worn smooth with time. The design was simple, etched deep. It looked like two winding lines, two rivers, flowing side by side, until they merged, becoming one. She snatched it up, The silver was still warm from his skin. Two rivers become one. He was not just leaving her. He was not just setting her free. He was leaving her his heart, his soul. "Evelyn," her father called out from the fire, his voice small and hopeful. Is he gone?" She stood up, the silver pendant clutched tight in her fist. She looked at her father, his face pale and tear-stained in the gloom. He was her past. He was the world of rules, of safety, of clean sheets and respectable names. And he was a world of lies. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and cold as the morning air. "He is gone." She walked to her horse. "Oh, thank God," Samuel breathed, slumping in relief. "We are safe. We can go. We are not going," Evelyn said. She swung herself up into the saddle. The motion was no longer clumsy, no longer the terrified scramble of the inspector's daughter. It was fluid, practiced. "Evelyn, what are you doing? Where are you going? He has left you." She looked down at him, at the man who was her blood, but no longer her world. "He is wounded. Father, he will die out there. I am going after him." "No, I forbid it. Evelyn, I am your father. I command you." "And I am your daughter," she said, her voice breaking, but her resolve like iron. "But I am not a child. You must go. Go east. Follow the river. You will find the trading post. You will be safe. Tell them your daughter died in the desert. It is the only way." "Evelyn, please, do not leave me." She kicked the horse. "I love you, Father." She rode out of the camp, leaving him alone by the dying fire. She rode into the darkness, her eyes fixed on the fresh tracks of Tala's Mustang. She was defying her father, her culture, her race, and her past. She was riding toward a man who had nothing, who was a hunted animal, and who was now her entire world. She found him an hour later, just as the sky was turning a pale, bruised purple. He had not gotten far. He was slumped over his horse's neck, the animal standing patiently in a grove of cottonwoods. He was barely conscious. She pulled him from the horse, easing his dead weight to the ground. "You are a fool," he rasped, his eyes fluttering open. He saw her, and a look of profound pain crossed his face. "Go back, Taji, go back to your father." "Shut up," she whispered, her voice fierce. She cradled his head in her lap. "You are my home. You are all I have. I am not leaving you." He looked at her, his vision swimming. He saw the silver pendant clutched in her hand. "Two rivers," she whispered, holding it up. "You cannot separate them, not even you." They stayed in that hidden grove for 2 days. She hunted a small rabbit, which she cooked. She brought him water in his own water skin. She broke his fever with the herbs she had watched him use, forcing the bitter tea past his lips. She did not sleep. She watched him, the pistol in her lap. On the 3rd day, the fever broke. He awoke, weak, his shoulder a throbbing agony, but his eyes were clear. He looked at her. She was gaunt, her face stained, her scarlet dress in filthy tatters. She had never been more beautiful. "You stayed," he said. "I will always stay," she replied. When he was strong enough to ride, he led her to a high place, a flat mesa of red rock that overlooked the entire world. They called it Red Mesa. They stood there as the sun began to die, painting the sky in colors of blood and fire and passion. The wind was high, whipping her hair around her face, tearing at her torn dress. "Craven will not stop," he said, his voice quiet, restored. "He will hunt you, and the soldiers will hunt me. There is no place for us, not in my world, not in yours." "Then we will make a place," she said, stepping in front of him, blocking his view of the world, making herself his only view. "I am an exile," he said, his voice raw. "I have nothing. I am a Na'i, an enemy to my own people. I have no Hogan, no sheep, no honor." "You have me," she said. She reached up, her hand touching the rough skin of his cheek.
And you have this?
She held up the pendant. He looked at her, at this woman who had given up everything, her family, her name, her safety, for him. They stood there, on the roof of the world, two outcasts against the dying sun, and they made their vow. It was not with words. It was with a look, a promise to live together, or to die together, but to be together. That night, they did not build a fire. The air was cold, but they had a different heat. He led her to a small alcove in the rock, a shallow cave sheltered from the relentless wind. He laid out the last of their blankets, the ones from his own hogan. He turned to her. The kiss was not like the first one in the storm, born of fear. It was not like the second in the canyon, born of gratitude. This one was a choice. This one was a claim. He touched her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "Evelyn," he said, the English name sounding strange and sacred on his tongue. She leaned into his touch. The time for pretending, for fighting, for history was over. He pulled her to him, his mouth finding hers in the darkness. It was a kiss of desperation, of hunger, of two people who had been starved for a lifetime. It was a release of all the tension, all the fear, all the death. His hands moved from her face, down her neck, to the tattered laces of the scarlet dress. He was a man, and he wanted her. But he was also a man who had lost everything, and he was humbled by the gift she was offering. She did not wait. Her own hands, no longer trembling, went to his shirt, pulling the ruined cloth aside. She pressed her lips to his skin, to the warm, living flesh just above his bandaged shoulder. She tasted his salt, his sweat. He pulled back, his breath ragged.
I am marked. I am nothing."
"You are everything," she whispered. She finished undoing the laces. Shrugging the torn satin from her shoulders, it fell to the rocky floor, leaving her in her thin chemise. The cold night air hit her skin, but she did not shiver. She was burning. He looked at her, his eyes dark, unreadable in the moonlight. She took his hand, his good hand, and placed it on her heart. She felt his calloused, scarred fingers spread against her skin. She was showing him that she was not afraid. This was not the gentle, hesitant exploration of a Boston drawing room. This was the earth. This was the wind. This was raw and honest and real. He lifted her, laying her down on the blankets, his body covering hers. He was heavy and solid and safe. It was emerging. It was sacred, a ritual performed under the silent, watching stars. And it was earthly, the smell of dust and sweat and desire. It was the desperate, beautiful coupling of two people who had nothing left in the world but each other. And as they moved together, as he became part of her, the final barriers dissolved. He was not the dying warrior. She was not the Bilagana lady. They were two souls, two rivers, finally, after a lifetime of flowing apart, merging into one single powerful, unstoppable current. They were no longer red and white. They were just one. The high, cold air of Red Mesa was pure. It tasted of freedom. For 2 days, they had existed in that sheltered alcove, suspended between the earth and the stars. Evelyn tended to Tala's shoulder, the wound closing, his fever gone. He taught her the names of the stars in his language, the silent, watchful ones. She taught him the feel of her skin. They were no longer two worlds. They were one. But the world below would not wait. They were out of food. Their horses were gaunt. The peace of the mesa could not last. "We must go," Tala said on the third morning. He stood, his shoulders stiff but strong, and looked south, toward the heart of the Dinetta. "Where?" Evelyn asked, pulling the blanket around her. She was his holy. "Craven is hunting us. The soldiers are hunting you. Where is safe?" "Nowhere," he said simply. "But we cannot run forever. We must warn them, My people. Evelyn's heart tightened. They called you Anna Yee. They cast you out. Hastian. He said you were an enemy. He is an old man. He sees the past, Tala said, turning to her. He touched the silver pendant, the two rivers, that now rested in the hollow of her throat. The young men, the warriors, they see the future. They see Craven. They know he is a plague. They will listen. I must try. He was not just an exile returning. He was a warrior, bringing home the truth. And he was bringing home his wife. The journey was slow. A careful descent from the high rock. They avoided the open trails, sticking to the washes, their movements silent. When they arrived at the hidden village, the place of the sacred spring, the reception was cold as stone. The same elders, Hastian and Azza, met them at the edge of the canyon. Their faces were impassive, but their eyes were hard. You return, Hastian said. It was an accusation. You were told to go north. You were told you were not welcome. I am Dine, Tala said, his voice quiet but echoing with a new authority. He did not sit. He stood tall. And I have come to warn you, Major Craven. He hunts us, but he will not stop with us. He has a paper from the railroad. He means to clear this canyon. He is coming with many men, mercenaries. You brought this trouble, Azza rasped, her eyes on Evelyn. This white woman, she is the magnet for the iron. She pulls the death here. Evelyn stood beside Tala, her head high. She was no longer the frightened girl from Boston. She wore a simple buckskin shirt and leggings, traded for at a distant outpost. Her skin was stained dark by the sun. She met the old woman's gaze without flinching. I am his wife, Evelyn said, her voice clear. The word hung in the dry air. Hastian's eyes widened slightly. He looked at the silver pendant around her neck. He looked at the way Tala stood, his body a shield, close to her. This cannot be, Hastian whispered. It is, Tala said. And the man who hunts my wife, the man who killed my father, is coming here. We do not have time for old laws. We must fight. Fight, Hastian scoffed. We are few. The young men are scattered. We are not warriors. We are survivors. We will hide. The canyon will protect us. The canyon cannot protect you from this, Tala argued. He will not pass by. He will come for you. I know this man. A young man, tall and lean, stepped forward from behind the elders. He had the hard, angry eyes of a man who had seen too much. I know him, too. He is the one they call the Butcher. He led the raid at Two Forks. My brother died there. He looked at Tala. I am called Key. I will fight with you. Another stepped forward, and another. The young men, the ones who had not yet had the fight beaten out of them, began to gather. Before Hastian could speak, a high, thin cry came from the lookout posted on the canyon rim. They come! They come! Many riders! The sun is on their rifles! Blue coats! And others! They carry the Iron Snake's flag! Tala grabbed Evelyn's arm, pulling her back toward the shelter of the hogans. Get inside, with the women. No, she said, pulling the heavy pistol from her belt. I am your wife. I fight with you. He looked at her, at the raw determination in her face. He nodded once. Then stay low and shoot for the heart. The riders appeared at the mouth of the canyon. It was not a small patrol. It was an army, at least 30 mercenaries in civilian clothes, heavily armed. And with them, a contingent of 10 blue-coated soldiers, led by the same young lieutenant whose Corporal Tala had killed. And riding between Major Craven and the lieutenant, his hands bound, his face a mask of gray terror, was Samuel Carter. Evelyn! Her father screamed, his voice a dry, cracking plea. Evelyn, daughter! Thank God! We are here to save you! Evelyn froze. Her blood ran cold. Her father, he was with them. He was their prisoner, their guide, their excuse. This was her fault, all of it. Craven rode forward, his scarred face split in a triumphant grin. He held up his hand in a mockery of peace. "Tala, Redhawk, you have caused me a great deal of trouble." Tala stood in the center of the small village, his rifle held loosely at his side. The young warriors, Kay and the others, fanned out behind him, taking cover in the rocks. "You have been a busy man," Craven called out, his voice oily and loud. "You stole my prisoner, Mr. Carter here. You killed a United States soldier, and—" his eyes fixed on Evelyn, his grin widening. "You stole my woman. I am here to collect what is mine." The lieutenant spurred his horse forward, his face stiff with duty. "Tala, Redhawk, I am here to arrest you for the murder of Corporal Davies. Surrender yourself and the woman, and these people," he gestured to the village, "will not be harmed." "Do not listen to him," Tala said, his voice low, for his own warriors. "He is a liar." "Evelyn," Samuel Carter cried out, tears streaming down his face. "Please, daughter, come out. It is all a mistake. Tell them this animal forced you. I will protect you. It is over." She was trapped, her father, begging for her life, representing a world that would see her as a victim, a tainted woman to be pitied and locked away. Her husband, standing ready to die, representing a world that saw her as a warrior, a wife. She was being forced to choose, in front of everyone. Hastian, the elder, stepped up beside Tala. "This is the death you have brought, Ana-E," he whispered, his voice shaking with rage. "You have doomed us all." Tala did not look at him. He looked at Kay. He looked at the young men. He raised his rifle. "This is the man who killed my father," he said, his voice clear and carrying. "This is the man who will burn your hogans and take your women. Will you hide behind the words of old men, or will you fight for your home?" Kay raised his own rifle. "I fight with Tala," he shouted. "Then you all die," Craven roared. He dropped his hand. The battle exploded. It was not a fight, it was chaos. The mercenaries' repeating rifles sent a hail of lead into the village. The soldiers, more disciplined, began to form a skirmish line. From the back of the mercenary line, a heavy thump sounded, followed by a whistling shriek, a mortar. The shell landed on a hogan, erupting in a spray of fire and dirt. The dry timbers caught instantly. Tala moved, not as a man, but as a force of nature. His wound was forgotten. His exile was forgotten. He was a warrior defending his land. "Kay, to the rocks. Draw their fire, you." He pointed to two others. "Circle left. Get the horses." His own rifle cracked. A mercenary on a tall bay horse clutched his chest and toppled from the saddle. Evelyn fired the heavy pistol, the kick jarring her arm. She aimed for the men, not the blue coats, but the mercenaries, the ones in Craven's pay. She saw a man fall. She did not feel triumph. She did not feel sick. She felt nothing, only a cold, focused need to survive. Drums, the old women, led by Asa, had begun to beat the war drums from inside the main kiva. The sound was a deep, defiant heartbeat under the rattle of gunfire. Thump, 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 thump. It was the sound of the earth itself, rising in anger. Smoke filled the canyon. The air was thick with the smell of black powder, burning juniper, and fear. Another mortar shell hit. It struck the hogan closest to Evelyn. The roof collapsed in a shower of sparks and flame. The screams from inside were cut short. Evelyn was reloading, her hands shaking as she slotted fresh cartridges into the pistol. Through the smoke, she heard another sound. Not a scream, a child's cry. She looked under a heavy, smoldering beam of the collapsed hogan. A small hand was sticking out. A little boy, no more than 4 years old, was trapped. His mother lay a few feet away, her eyes open, unseeing. Evelyn did not think. She dropped the pistol. "Evelyn, no!" Tala's voice, a desperate command. She did not listen. She ran. She ran from her cover, out into the open, into the killing ground. Bullets snapped past her, kicking up dust at her feet. She was no longer the Vassar girl. She was not the inspector's daughter. She was Tazi. She was a mother. She was a wife. She reached the burning hogan, the heat scorching her face. The child was weeping, his leg pinned. Tala saw her. He saw her run into the open. He saw the mercenaries turning their rifles toward her. He saw Craven, on his horse, raise his own rifle. A slow, terrible smile spreading across his scarred face. He had her. "No!" Tala roared. He abandoned his cover. He left the fight. He ran, his only thought to cross the space between them. Evelyn seized the burning beam. The heat seared her hands, but she did not let go. She pulled, screaming with effort, adrenaline giving her a strength she did not possess. The beam shifted. The boy scrambled free. She grabbed him, pulling him into her arms. She turned, looking for safety. She saw two things at once. Craven, his rifle aimed at her heart, and Tala, his face a mask of desperate love, launching his body through the air. He hit her. He did not hit her gently. He hit her like a rock, his body slamming into hers, knocking her and the child to the ground, out of the line of fire. A rifle cracked. Tala grunted, a heavy, wet sound. He had landed on top of her, his body shielding hers. He looked down at her, his eyes wide with a strange, soft surprise. "Tala," she whispered. He tried to speak. He coughed. A spray of bright red blood blossomed on his lips. He looked down. At the center of his chest, a dark, rapidly spreading stain was soaking his shirt. The bullet, meant for her, had taken him. "No!" she screamed. It was not a word. It was the sound of her soul tearing in two. "No! Please, no!" Across the battlefield, Samuel Carter watched it all. He saw his daughter, his beautiful, lost daughter, run into the fire. He saw the savage, the man he despised, throw himself in front of her. He saw the scarred face of Craven, laughing as he lowered his smoking rifle. The civilized man in Samuel Carter died. The ledgers, the honor, the rules, they all burned away. All that was left was the father. He grabbed the pistol from the astonished lieutenant's holster. "Mr. Carter, no." Samuel did not listen. He ran forward, stumbling, screaming a wordless roar of pure, paternal rage. Craven turned, his smile fading, surprised by this new, mad attacker. "What the—" Samuel did not stop. He raised the pistol and fired, once, twice, 3 times. The bullet slammed into Craven's chest. The big man looked down, shocked, a bloody hand coming up to his chest. He toppled backward from his horse, dead before he hit the ground. For a moment, the battle stopped. The mercenaries, seeing their leader fall, faltered. The lieutenant, his face a mask of shock, regained his senses. A mercenary raised his rifle to shoot Samuel. The lieutenant's own pistol fired, and the mercenary fell. "Retreat!" the lieutenant yelled. "Fall back! Fall back!" The soldiers, glad for the order, began to pull back, covering their retreat. The mercenaries, their paymaster dead, broke and fled, scattering up the canyon. The gunfire faded, replaced by the crackling of the fire and the sound of weeping. Evelyn was oblivious. The child had scrambled away to the kiva. She was holding Tala, pulling him into her lap, her hands pressed against the terrible, gushing wound in his chest. "Tala, no, stay with me, please, stay with me." He was drowning in his own blood, but his eyes were open. They were on her. He raised a hand, his fingers shaking, smeared with his own lifeblood. He touched her cheek. He traced the line of her jaw, leaving a dark, wet streak of red on her skin. A mark, a brand. "One night," he whispered, his voice a wet rattle. "Do not," she sobbed, rocking him. "Do not say it. I forbid it." He smiled. a faint, bloody smile. One night, one life. His breath hitched. His eyes held hers, a look of pure, undiluted love. One soul. His hand fell from her face. His eyes, fixed on hers, went still. The battle was over. Samuel Carter stood, trembling, over Craven's body, the smoking pistol still in his hand. The elders, Hastian and Uzzah, walked out of the kiva. They looked at the dead mercenaries. They looked at Samuel, the white man who had saved them. Then they looked at Evelyn. She was rocking the body of their exiled warrior, her face painted with his blood. Hastian walked to her. He knelt in the dust. He looked at Tala's still face. He saw the peace there. He looked at the woman holding him. He saw the love. He saw the strength. The old man reached out and placed his hand on Tala's shoulder. "He is not an Ai," Hastian said, his voice thick with a grief that was centuries old. "He is Dine. He is the warrior who returned. He is the soul who protected his people." He looked at Evelyn, his eyes finally seeing her. "He is the spirit of the canyon. He is between this world and the next." He holds the door open. The battle had ended in tragedy, but for the village, for the canyon, a new, terrible freedom had been born, and Tala Redhawk, in death, had become their savior. She did not move. She sat in the dust and the blood, in the settling smoke of the battlefield, and held the body of her husband. The village was a ruin of smoldering hogans, the living, women, children, and the few remaining warriors emerged slowly from the kiva, from the rocks. They saw her, a white woman painted in the blood of their savior, keening a low, broken sound that was not in their language, but was a grief they understood perfectly. Her father, Samuel Carter, was being tended by the young lieutenant. He was slumped against a rock, his face gray, his hand pressed to his side where shrapnel from the mortar blast had torn through his fine coat. He was watching her, his eyes hollow. Uzzah, the old woman who had spat at Evelyn's feet, walked toward her. Her face was a mask of ancient, unmovable sorrow. She knelt beside Evelyn, her movements stiff. She looked not at Evelyn, but at Tala. She placed a gnarled hand on his chest. Over the terrible, bloody ruin. Evelyn wanted to scream at her, to push her away, to protect him from this woman who had hated him. Uzzah closed her eyes. Her lips moved, chanting a silent prayer. Her hand was perfectly still. The canyon was silent. The only sound was the crackle of the dying fires and Evelyn's own ragged breath. The old woman's eyes snapped open. She looked at Hastian, who stood watching, his face broken. "He is not gone," Uzzah said, her voice a dry rasp, but now holding a spark of something impossible. "His breath is not in his chest, but his spirit. His spirit is still holding on. It has not crossed. He is walking the spirit road, but he has not left us." Hope. It was a cruel, sharp thing, more painful than the grief. Evelyn's head snapped up. "What is he?" "He is not here," the old woman said, cutting her off. "But he is not with the ancestors." She looked at Evelyn, her black eyes finally seeing her, not as a white woman, but as a force. "He is with you. He stays for you." They carried him, Kay and the other young warriors. They made a litter and they took him from the ruined village, away from the smell of death. They carried him up a high, narrow path to a ledge of flat rock, a place open to the wind, carpeted in dry, sweet grass. It was a place. Evelyn knew. That was halfway to the stars, a place to heal, or a place to die. They laid him there, and Evelyn sat. She did not leave, for 1 day, for 2, for 3. She sat. The dying women, who had once looked at her with hatred, now came in silence. They brought her a small bowl of water, a strip of dried venison. Uzzah came and showed her which herbs to crush, which ones to boil and lay on the wound in his chest to keep the poison out. They saw the blood oath on her face. They saw her devotion. She was no longer Bilagana. She was the wife. Below, in the canyon, the world of men continued. The young lieutenant, a man named Harris, had restored order. His soldiers were not conquerors. They were a burial detail. They collected the bodies of the mercenaries. Craven's corpse, stripped of its weapons, was left for the buzzards. Harris approached Samuel Carter. Samuel was weak, his breathing shallow. The wound in his side was infected. "Mr. Carter," Harris said, his voice quiet, his duty a heavy weight on his young shoulders. I have a decision to make. I have no authority to be here. My patrol was to find your daughter and to apprehend a fugitive. I have found this, a war." Samuel looked up. He saw his daughter, a small, stubborn figure on the high ledge, a silhouette against the setting sun. He had lost her. He had lost her to this red, brutal, honest world, and he knew with a chilling certainty that he was dying. "It was not a war, Lieutenant," Samuel whispered, his voice a papery rasp. "It was a lie."
"Sir, all of this, it was me."
The confession came, not in a torrent, but in a slow, painful drip, the last of his pride bleeding out into the dust. "The railroad, years ago, I took money, bribes, to look the other way on a land deal. It was nothing, a few $1,000s, but Craven, he found out. He had the ledgers, my ledgers." Harris listened, his face grim. "He blackmailed me," Samuel continued, his eyes fixed on his daughter. "He said he would ruin me, unless I signed the new survey, the one that gave him rights to this canyon. He said it was unoccupied. I signed it. I did it to protect Evelyn, to protect her name, and I brought this hell to her. I am the one. I gave Craven the paper. I am the one." He was weeping, the dry, painful sobs of a broken, dying man. Evelyn had come down from the ledge to get fresh water. She had heard it all. She stood behind the lieutenant, her face stained with dust and tears. She felt nothing, no anger, no betrayal, only a vast, aching pity. The man who had been her father, the symbol of her entire world, was just a small, frightened man who had made a mistake. She stepped forward. "Father?" Samuel flinched, his eyes wide. "Evelyn, I am sorry. I am so sorry." She knelt beside him. She took his hand. It was cold. "It is over, Father. It is all over." She looked at Lieutenant Harris. "He is not a criminal. He is a dying man. He needs a doctor." Harris looked at Samuel's confession, at Evelyn's quiet strength, and at the armed warriors watching him. He was a soldier, but he was not a fool. "My report," Harris said, his voice firm, "will state that Major Craven and his mercenaries, acting against railroad and United States Army interests, instigated a conflict with the native population, that Mr. Carter was his prisoner, that Craven was killed in the ensuing battle, that the fugitive, Tala Redhawk, was also killed." He looked at Evelyn. "And that the survey documents were lost, that this canyon is, and remains, sovereign Dine territory." He was giving her an out. He was giving her a new life. He was ending the war. "I will take your father to Fort Defiance," Harris said. "He needs medical aid, and he must give this testimony. Will you come with us? Miss Carter, it is over. You can come home." Samuel gripped her hand. "Evelyn, please, daughter, come home. Come back to me." Evelyn looked at her father, this ghost of her past. She loved him, but he was asking her to return to a world that was no longer hers. She slowly, gently pulled her hand from his. She looked up at the high ledge, where Tala lay, walking the line between worlds. "I am home, Father," she whispered. She kissed him on his forehead, a final, loving farewell. "Go," she said to the lieutenant. "Take him. He is a good man." She turned and walked back up the path, not looking back as the soldiers made a litter and carried her father and her entire past out of the canyon. She returned to the ledge. She sat. She waited. For 3 more days. On the 7th day, the sun was a hot copper coin in the sky. She was wiping his face with a cool, damp cloth. His skin was still hot. He had not stirred. The wound in his chest was a raw, red valley, but it was clean. She leaned down, her lips near his ear. "I am here, Tala," she whispered, as she had 1,000 times. "I am not leaving. You cannot leave me. I forbid it." His eyelids fluttered. She froze. He opened his eyes. They were not fevered. They were not cloudy. They were clear, dark, and deep, and they were focused on her. He tried to speak. His throat was dry. "Water," she said, her voice shaking, fumbling for the water skin. She lifted his head gently. He drank. It was a long, slow swallow. He lay back, his breath a sigh. "Taji," he whispered. His voice was a bare rasp. She wept. She bowed her head, her tears falling onto his chest. "You came back," she sobbed. "You came back." His hand, thin and weak, moved, his fingers tangling in her hair. "You stayed." "I told you I would." He was weak, so weak. He lay there for another day, just watching her as she moved, as she slept, as she lived. Finally, he spoke, his voice stronger. "You should have gone." She stopped, the bowl of broth in her hands. "What?" "With your father," he said, his gaze fixed on the endless blue sky. "This land, it is hard. It is a land of stone. It has no room for a Bilagana woman. It brought me only death. It will bring you the same." She set the bowl down. She looked at him, the warrior she had pulled back from the spirit road. "You are wrong," she said, her voice soft, but as hard as the red rock beneath them. "This land has no room for a white woman, and it has no room for an exiled Dine warrior. It has no room for us, as we were." She leaned in, her face close to his. "But any land," she whispered. "Any land has a place, if we build it together." He looked at her, at the strength in her eyes, the sun in her hair, the silver pendant at her throat. This was not the woman he had found. This was the woman who had remade him. When he was strong enough to stand, his arm in a sling, his chest tightly bound, they buried the dead. Hastian and Astza led the ritual. They burned the bodies of the mercenaries in a deep ravine, purifying the land of their spirits. The Dine warriors who had fallen were given a high burial, their bodies wrapped and placed in the rocks, to be close to the wind. Tala and Evelyn stood before the new grave of the soldier, Corporal Davies. They had marked it with a simple cross of juniper wood. He was just a boy," Evelyn said, her voice thick. "He was a soldier," Tala said. "He died for his paper, as we died for our land." Kay and the other young warriors came to them. They were not warriors now. They were builders. They brought a tall, straight cottonwood pole. They planted it in the center of the ruined village, in the ashes of the old world. Tala, weak but standing, took his rifle and placed it at the base. His war was over. Hastian came and tied a prayer sash, blue with turquoise. To the top, it was a sign of peace with the holy people. Evelyn looked at it. She thought of her father. She thought of the young lieutenant, a man who had chosen peace over war. She tore a strip of white cloth from her own ruined chemise. She tore a strip of blue from the dead corporal's coat, left behind. She walked to the pole. She tied both strips beneath the prayer sash. White, blue, turquoise, the colors of 3 nations, twisting together in the wind. A new flag, a symbol of reconciliation. Evelyn Carter stepped back. She looked at the flag. She looked at the man beside her. She looked at the red earth, and she knew, with a certainty that settled into her bones, that the woman from Boston was gone. That woman had died in the desert. had burned away in the saloon, had been buried with the dead. She was Taji. She was the woman of the wind. She was a wife. She was of the earth. That night, they did not return to the high ledge. They returned to their alcove on Red Mesa, the place where they had first truly become one. It was their home. He was still weak. She built a small fire at the mouth of the cave, its light painting the stone walls a warm, living red. They sat, not talking, just watching the flames. This was not a celebration. It was a new beginning, born from ashes. She turned to him. The firelight played on the hard lines of his face, his copper skin. She touched the new, clean bandage on his chest.
"Does it hurt?"
she whispered. "No," he said, his hand covering hers, pressing it against his heart. "It is a reminder that I am alive." He pulled her to him. The kiss was not the desperate, hungry kiss of their first joining. It was slow. It was deep. It was the taste of survival. It was a promise of life in the face of so much death. It was a final farewell to the ghosts, to their pasts, to the people they had been, and it was a sacred, quiet greeting to the new life they were building, right here, on this rock. They made love, slowly, tenderly. It was a claiming. It was a prayer. After, they lay tangled in the firs, the firelight washing over them. Her pale skin and his copper skin were indistinguishable. They were one color, the color of the red earth, the color of the fire, the color of immortality. He held her, his hand stroking her hair. He looked out at the stars. "My mother, the wind took her screams," he said, his voice a quiet rumble. "My father, the wind heard his silence. It remembers all." He pulled her closer, his lips against her temple. "I ask the wind, if I die before you, or you before me, that it takes our souls, that it spins them together, so that even in death, we are never apart." She turned, pressing her face into the warm skin of his neck. "When you hear the wind, Taji," he whispered, "you will hear me. I will always be with you." The firelight danced, casting their two shadows as one on the ancient stone, two bodies made immortal by the flame. The peace of Red Mesa was absolute. It was a silence not of emptiness, but of presence. The wind, which he had promised her, was the only voice. It moved through the high alcove, a cool, dry breath that smelled of juniper and eternity. They lay tangled in the firs, their small fire reduced to a bed of pulsing red embers, a mirror of the stars above. The world of men, of smoke and blood, was a distant memory. 1,000 miles below, Evelyn was asleep, her head resting on his good shoulder, her breath a soft, steady rhythm against his skin. Tala was awake. He was always awake. He watched the fire. He watched the stars. He listened to the wind. His body was weak, the great puckered scar on his chest a dull, deep ache. But his spirit was whole. He looked at the woman beside him, her pale hair a spill of moonlight against his copper skin. Taji, his free heart. He had found his... The wind shifted. It carried something new. It was not the scent of juniper. It was the smell of sweat, the metallic tang of a rifle, the faint, sour smell of laudanum. Tala's body went from complete repose to coiled stillness. He did not move, but every muscle locked. A boot scraped on the stone, just outside the mouth of the alcove. Evelyn stirred, sensing the change in him. "Tala what?" He moved, a blur of motion, pushing her from the blankets, rolling his own body in the opposite direction, toward his rifle. "They are here," he hissed. The shadows at the mouth of the cave detached themselves from the darkness. 4 men, gaunt, filthy, their eyes wild in the dim firelight. They were the survivors of Silver Mesa, the mercenaries who had fled. "You are hard to kill, Red Hawk," a voice slurred. A 5th man stepped into the light. He was not gaunt. He was a massive, ruined shape. He wore a cavalry coat, soaked in old, black blood. He held his left arm tight against his chest, his face a mask of dried blood, scar tissue, and necrotic flesh. Where Samuel Carter had shot him, his chest was a raw, weeping wound. But he was alive. Major Craven. But not, Craven finished, his voice a wet rattle. Impossible. The bitch in the saloon. She said she shot my heart. She missed. He looked at Evelyn, who was scrambling backward, her hand reaching for the corporal's pistol by the furs. Craven said. One of the mercenaries kicked the pistol away. Tala had his rifle. He brought it up. But he was weak. He was still healing from the wound Craven's bullet had already given him. He was a warrior, but he was a wounded one. Drop it, Craven ordered. Or they kill her. Two of the men grabbed Evelyn, yanking her to her feet, her hands twisted painfully behind her back. Tala looked at her. Her eyes were wide with terror. He slowly, agonizingly, lowered the rifle. Good boy. Craven sneered. He was high on the laudanum, his eyes pinned, his pain held at bay by the drug. He was a ghost, fueled only by hatred and revenge. You cost me everything, my contract, my men, my reputation. She is not yours, Tala said, his voice a low growl. She is whatever I say she is. Craven spat. You are just meat. Tie him. Two of the men advanced on Tala. He did not resist. He could not with Evelyn held at knife point. They bound his hands, his ankles, pulling the ropes tight, cutting into his skin. They threw him to the stone floor near the fire. They tied Evelyn's hands in front of her, then shoved her down, her back against the rock wall. Craven stood over Tala. He kicked him, a brutal, heavy blow to his wounded shoulder. Tala cried out, a sharp, ragged sound. Tala, Evelyn screamed. He likes that, does he? Craven said, his breath sour. He likes to hear you scream his name. He kicked him again, this time in the ribs. Stop, Evelyn begged. Please, stop. He is already beaten. You have won. Craven paused, his breathing heavy. He looked at Evelyn. He walked over to her, his movement stiff. He knelt, his scarred, ruined face just inches from hers. The smell of his wound, of his breath, was suffocating. I won, he mused. Yes, I did. He looked her up and down, at the simple buckskin, the silver pendant at her throat. He laughed, a dry, racking cough. He tried to make you one of them, a savage. But I remember the red dress. You were good at that. You were meant for men like me. Tala struggled against his bonds. Do not touch her. Craven ignored him. His gaze was fixed on Evelyn. You are smart. I will give you that. The way you tricked me, that little message. Evelyn's mind was racing. He was high. He was arrogant. He was focused on her. Tala was wounded. They were both tied. This was the end. Unless... She stopped struggling. She let the tears that were already in her eyes fall. She let her body go limp, a picture of female terror. Please, Major, she whispered. Do not kill me. I will do whatever you want. Craven's grin widened. His eyes, though pinned, glazed with a new, different hunger. Whatever I want. Yes, she whispered, her voice trembling. He is an animal. He took me. He forced me. I hated it. Tala went still. He stared at her, a look of profound, agonizing betrayal on his face. Evelyn, no, he breathed. Quiet, animal, she spat, not looking at him. Her eyes were fixed on Craven. But you are a major. You are a leader. You survived. You are strong. Craven was completely seduced. His ego, inflamed by the drug, swelled. That is right, I am. He is half dead, she whispered, leaning forward just slightly. "Let his men take him away, and I will be yours. I will be your
woman, like you said."
One of the mercenaries laughed. "She is a smart one. Major knows a real man when she sees one." Craven licked his dry, cracked lips. "Untie her," he said. "Major," one of his men said, confused. "She is a trick."
"I said untie her. She knows who won. Now get out, both of you. Take the renegade. Wait at the bottom of the pass. I will be down when I am finished."
The men hesitated, but Craven was their leader. They obeyed. One of them sliced the ropes on Evelyn's ankles. They kept her hands bound in front of her. "Now go," Craven ordered. The two mercenaries grabbed Tala, hauling his bound body from the alcove.
"Evelyn!"
Tala screamed.
"Taji, do not do this!"
"Take the animal away," she said, her voice cold. "I am sick of the sound of his voice." They dragged him into the darkness. She could hear him struggling. Then the heavy, sickening sound of a rifle butt hitting his head. Then silence. She was alone with Craven. "Smart girl," Craven said, his voice thick. He stepped toward her. His heavy pistol, a Navy Colt, was tucked into his belt, right at the front. "Very smart." You are a great man, Major," she whispered. He never..." She let her voice trail off. "Just one thing." "What?" he said, impatient, leaning down. "A kiss," she breathed. "A kiss from the victor, so I know that I am yours." He laughed, a full, bubbling sound. "I like that." He leaned in, his face filling her vision. His hands came up to cup her head. Her bound hands, hidden in the shadows of her lap, moved. As his lips were a breath from hers, she did not meet his kiss. She lunged. Her hands shot up, not for his face, but for the pistol. Her bound fingers, trained by Tala, found the grip. She ripped the heavy gun from his belt. Craven's eyes went wide. His arrogance dissolved into pure, stunned shock.
"Bitch!"
He never said another word. She shoved the barrel against the raw, infected wound in his chest, the one her father had given him. She pulled the trigger. The explosion was deafening in the small alcove. The flash illuminated her face, a mask of pure, divine rage. She pulled it again, and again, and again. She emptied the pistol into his black heart, screaming as she fired. A wordless sound of vengeance, of grief, of final, absolute release. Craven was thrown backward by the force of the repeated, close-range shots. He collapsed by the fire, his body spasming, his dead eyes reflecting the embers. She had done it. She had finished what her father started. She dropped the empty pistol. Her hands were still bound. She fumbled at the knots with her teeth, tasting the hemp, her body shaking. The sounds from outside the cave, gunfire, one shot, then two, then a terrible, wet scream. "Tala," she breathed. She ripped the ropes free on a sharp piece of rock, tearing her own skin. She grabbed her own pistol, the corporal's gun, from where it had been kicked. She ran out of the alcove. The scene on the moonlit ledge was hell. One mercenary was dead, his throat opened by a knife. The other was standing over Tala, who was on his knees. The mercenary had his rifle aimed at Tala's head. "Tala!" she screamed. The mercenary turned, surprised. He swung his rifle toward her. Tala moved. It was his last surge, his final act of will. He was bound, but his legs were free. He launched himself from his knees, not at the man, but at the man's legs. A low, brutal tackle. He knocked the mercenary off balance. The rifle fired, the shot going wild, echoing into the night. The mercenary fell backward, Tala on top of him. The man was strong. He brought the rifle butt down, smashing it into Tala's wounded shoulder. Tala roared in pain. The mercenary raised the rifle again, to brain him.
Evelyn, her hand steady, her eyes clear, raised her pistol.
"No," she said. She fired once. The shot hit the mercenary in the back. He stiffened. But he was not dead. He twisted, his face a mask of rage, bringing the rifle around. Tala, with a final, dying burst of strength, surged up. He had his knife. He had palmed it when they tied him. He drove the blade up, under the mercenary's chin, silencing him forever. The man collapsed. Silence.
The stars, the wind, the fire. All enemies were dead.
Tala lay on the stone, his breath a ragged, shuddering gasp. Evelyn ran to him.
Tala! Oh God, Tala!
He looked at her. He was not on his knees. He was on his back. His hands, still bound, were on his chest, and from between them, from the center of his chest, a new dark stain was spreading.
The mercenary's final, wild shot. It had not gone wild. It had hit him. It had found the one place that was still whole.
"No," she whispered, her hands fumbling with the ropes on his wrists.
"No, I healed you once. I can
do it again. The herbs.
Aza."
He smiled. It was a faint smile, but it was real. He was not in pain. He was finished. He raised his bound hands. Weakly, he touched her face. "Taji," he whispered. His voice was a thread.
"I am here,"
she sobbed, pressing her cheek against his hand.
"I am here. Do not go. Do not leave me."
"Taji," he said again. His eyes were clear. They were full of the stars and full of her. "My
free
heart." His hand slipped from her cheek. His eyes, fixed on her face, on the woman he loved, went still. His breath, the one he had promised to the wind, sighed out of him and was gone. She froze. The world stopped. She put her head down on his chest. She pressed her ear against the new, terrible wound. She listened. She listened for the strong, steady beat she had felt in the storm. There was nothing. Silence. The wind picked up, a high, lonely moan, tearing at her hair. She raised her head, and she screamed. It was not a cry of grief. It was a sound of atomic loss, a sound of the earth being torn in two. It echoed down the canyon, a sound that woke the dead. Below, in the village, they heard it. They heard the gunfire, the silence, and then the scream. Drums, the death drum, the sound of running feet. Torches appeared, snaking up the dark path. Hastian, Astza, the entire village. They arrived on the high ledge. They saw the carnage. They saw the body of Craven, the dead mercenaries. They saw the last enemy, the knife still in his throat. And they saw her, Evelyn, the woman of the wind. Her face was a mask of blood and tears. She was kneeling, holding the body of their savior, rocking him in her arms. Hastian stopped. He looked at the dead. He looked at Tala. He looked at her. He saw the story, written in blood on the stone. He slowly, stiffly sank to his knees.
Asa,
her face a ruin of sorrow, knelt beside him. Kay and the young warriors, one by one, knelt. They were not kneeling to her. They were kneeling to the spirit that lay dead. They were kneeling to the woman who held him. They were kneeling to a love that was stronger than armies, stronger than death. Evelyn's sobs stopped. She felt the wind on her face, his wind. She slowly raised her head. Her blue eyes, seen in the torchlight, were no longer the eyes of the woman from Boston. They were not weeping. They were burning. They were the color of the sky, but they held the fire of the red earth. She looked at the body of her husband. She looked at the kneeling people of his tribe. She whispered the words, a promise to the wind, a promise to his soul.
"One night,"
she breathed.
"It was enough. It was enough to make eternity."
They buried him on Red Mesa. It was not a burial of the earth. It was a burial of the sky. The warriors, Kay and the others, built a high scaffold of juniper poles. Facing the east, they wrapped his body in the finest blankets, the ones Asa had been saving for her own death. They placed his rifle on his chest and his knife in his hand. They did not bind him. He was a warrior, and he must be free to walk the spirit road. Evelyn watched, her body a single, hollow ache. The scream had taken her voice, leaving only a raw, torn whisper. She stood beside Hastian, who had placed his own sacred turquoise necklace on Tala's chest. The tribe, his people, who had named him Anna-E, now honored him as a god. She was the widow. She was the one he had died for. When the pyre was built, she was the one who took the torch. Her hand, steady, held the flame to the dry wood. The fire caught, roaring up into the cold night sky, a great, golden pillar that sent sparks spiraling up to join the stars. The people began to chant, a low, grieving song that was as old as the canyons. Evelyn stood, the heat scorching her face, her eyes dry. She had no tears left. She watched as the man she loved, the man who was her home, became smoke, became fire, became one with the wind. When the fire died, and the dawn came, cold and gray, Asa, the old woman, came to her. She held a small clay pot. In it was the gray, sacred ash from the pyre. The old woman dipped her fingers in the ash and marked Evelyn's face, a stripe across each cheek. "You are not Bilagana," Asa said, her voice no longer harsh, but heavy with respect. "You are not the woman who came from the desert. You are Asa-Niol, the woman of the wind. You carry his fire. You are one of us now. You are dying." Evelyn closed her eyes. She was no longer Evelyn Carter. That woman was Ash. 1 year passed. The seasons turned. The winter snows, deep and silent, covered the scars of the battle in the canyon. The spring came, and with it, a green so vibrant it looked like an illusion against the red rocks. The spring that Hastian had said was sacred, which had been fouled by the battle, ran clear again. The world of men had shifted. Lieutenant Harris had kept his word. His report, combined with the explosive testimony of a dying Samuel Carter, had reached Washington. The story of Major Craven, a rogue mercenary employed by the railroad, slaughtering civilians and killing a United States soldier, became a scandal. The Union Pacific West, facing political ruin and the threat of having its charter revoked, stopped the line. The press called it the Arizona Incident. A new treaty was signed, not a paper of lies, but a true one. The lands of the canyon, the Deneta, were declared sovereign, a reservation under the protection of the Holy People. And, incidentally, the United States government, which now had no interest in it. The Iron Snake had been stopped. The war was over. In the village, which had been rebuilt, life returned. Evelyn, Asa-Niol, had her own hogan, built by Kay and the young warriors. It was on the edge of the village, facing east, near the path that led to Red Mesa. She was the teacher. The battle had left many orphans, the boys she had pulled from the fire, and others. She gathered them in the shade of a great cottonwood tree. She taught them the English letters, how to read the words of the white man, so they would never again be tricked by paper. But more. She learned. She learned to grind the corn, to weave the blankets, her fingers growing calloused and skilled. She learned the songs, the prayers for the rain, the stories of the Spider Woman. The people called her the Woman of the Wind. They said she was a bridge. She was the white woman with the dying soul, the widow of the canyon's savior. She was respected. She was, in her own quiet way, loved. But she was lonely. The nights were the hardest. It was a night in the late fall, 1 year since the battle. The moon was a full, cold silver coin, bathing the canyon in an ethereal, ghostly light. The village was asleep. Evelyn sat outside her hogan, a blanket around her shoulders. She was listening. She heard the wind. It was moving down from the high mesa, from the place of his burial. It whispered through the pines, and in the sound, she heard it, a faint, distant sound, impossible, but real to her, the sound of a single horse, galloping, the steady, familiar rhythm of his Mustang. She heard the echo of a drum, a single, deep beat. She was not afraid. She closed her eyes, a small, sad smile touching her lips. He was here. He was riding the wind, just as he had promised. A small sound came from the doorway of the hogan. "Mother!" She turned. A small boy, barely steady on his feet, stood there, rubbing his eyes. He was a child of two worlds. He had her pale, sun-streaked hair, but he had his father's eyes, black as the night, deep as the canyon, and already full of a warrior's soul. He was Tala, the son she had been carrying when his father died. He toddled over to her, his small body warm, and climbed into her lap. He was 1 year old, a child of the new world. "I heard the horse," he whispered, his small voice sleepy. He looked up at her, his black eyes serious. "Mother, was father real?" Evelyn felt her throat tighten. The people of the village spoke of his father as a myth, a legend, the spirit who had saved them. To the boy, he was not a memory. He was a story. She pulled him close, her hand stroking his soft hair. She pointed, not to the mesa, not to the shadows, but up to the sky, to the wind itself. "He is real," she whispered, her voice thick. "He is more real than the stars." She touched the boy's small, sturdy chest, right where his heart beat. "He is here, and he is—" She nodded toward the sound of the wind. "He is there." She held him, and she spoke the words that had become her religion. "When you hear the wind, my son, you hear your father. He is always with you. He is always calling." The boy listened. He did not understand the words, but he understood the love. He leaned his head against her chest and fell asleep, safe, to the sound of his father's spirit riding the night air. A week later, he, who now acted as the village leader, came to her. He carried a small, heavy package, wrapped in oilcloth. "A trader left this at the post," he said, his face curious. "He said it came from the east, from a place called Boston." Evelyn's hands trembled as she took it. She had not seen anything from that world in over a year. Inside her hogan, by the light of her small fire, she unwrapped it. It was a letter, many pages, and a thick, official paper from a bank. The handwriting on the letter was thin, spidery, and frail. It was her father's. He was alive. He had not died at the fort. The army doctors had saved him, though his wound, he wrote, would plague him for the rest of his days. He was back in Boston, in the tall, quiet house she had grown up in. He wrote of his regret. He wrote of his confession. He wrote of the shame he had carried, and how, in that one moment of firing the pistol at Craven, he had finally, for the first time in his life, felt clean. "I have lost everything. Evelyn," he wrote, "my reputation is gone, my health is broken, and I have lost you, but I am proud of the man I finally became. In that last, terrible moment, I am proud that I was, at the end, a father." Then, the plea. "Come home, daughter. Please, this is no life for you. The savage world has taken enough. I have a bank draft here. It is for $1,000. It is enough to secure your passage, to buy you new clothes, to restore you. Your old room is waiting for you. I am an old, sick man. I do not wish to die alone. Please, come home." Evelyn read the letter. She felt a distant, aching sorrow. She thought of Boston, the gray skies, the cobblestone streets, the suffocating parlors, the rules, the life that was not a life, but a performance. She looked at her son, asleep on the furs, his small hand clutching the wooden bird Tala had been carving that first day in the hogan. She looked at her own hands, brown from the sun, the skin calloused from grinding corn. She touched the silver pendant at her throat. She took the letter. She took the bank draft for $1,000, a fortune that could buy a white woman anything. She walked to the fire.
My home is here,
she whispered. She dropped the papers, her father's love, his regret, and the entire civilized world into the flames. She watched them curl, turn black, and become ash. The next day, she took her son, she strapped him into his cradleboard, the one Ustza had woven for her, and she tied him to her back. She whistled, and her horse, a strong, fast pinto, came to her. She rode, not as a fugitive, but as a master of this land. She rode up the familiar path to Red Mesa. She dismounted and walked to the edge of the great cliff, the place of his pyre, the place of their final, terrible battle, the place of their love. The wind was high. It tore at her, pulling her long, dark hair free from its leather thong, whipping it around her face. She stood, a lone, strong figure against the vast, red, empty world. Her pinto, untethered, galloped freely across the mesa, a blur of white and brown. She was not Evelyn Carter. She was Azza Neol. She looked out over the canyons, her canyons. She was not lonely. She was not sad. She was full. She heard a sound, a high, sharp cry that cut through the whistle of the wind. She looked up. Circling, high above her, catching the updraft from the canyon, was a great, red-tailed eagle, the one from her dream. It circled once, it circled twice, a perfect, unbroken loop. It was not hunting, it was watching. It cried out again, a sound of fierce, wild freedom. Evelyn smiled, a true, radiant smile. She reached back, her hand touching the head of her son. "Did you hear him, my Tala?" she whispered to the wind. "He is here." The eagle, its wings spread wide, caught the high wind and soared south, a dark, disappearing speck against the fire of the sun. The high desert does not forget. The rocks hold the memory of blood and fire, and the wind. It carries the stories. Years in the West are measured in droughts and winters, not in days. They passed, one by one, turning the raw edges of the territory into something settled. The railroad, stopped by scandal and the death of its chief mercenary, found a new path far to the south, a path that was easier, a path that did not cut through the heart of the Dinetta. The canyon, that sacred, sovereign land, was left in peace. The story, however, did not stay in the canyon. It traveled. They say that in the village, on the nights of the new moon, the people still gather. They do not speak of the battle. They speak of the love that ended it. They say that when the summer rains come, washing the sky clean, a sound can sometimes be heard drifting down from the high red cliffs of the mesa. It is not the cry of the eagle. It is not the beat of the drum. It is a flute, a Navajo love flute, its notes high and thin and pure, a sound of such profound longing it can stop a man's heart. The old ones, the children of Ki, say it is the warrior, Tala Redhawk, the one who was exiled and returned, the spirit who guards the canyon. They say he is calling for his wife. And sometimes, if the night is very still and the listener's heart is open, they say the wind itself will answer, a soft, whispering sigh that moves through the pines. It is Azza Neol, the woman of the wind. They are still calling to one another, still bound by the promise the wind remembers, still one soul, woven together. The land itself changed to honor them. The town of Silver Mesa, that scar of vice and greed, could not survive without the blood money of the railroad. It rotted, it died, and its name was blown away like so much dust. But settlers came, families, not men of greed. They built new homes near the San Juan, in the place where the two rivers met. They heard the story from the Dingan. They learned of the white woman and the warrior. They learned of the blood that was shed, and the peace that was born. They tore down the sign that said Silver Mesa. They named their new town Two Rivers, a place of reconciliation. And at the crossroads, where the path to the canyon meets the path of the settlers, someone hammered a tall, flat slab of red rock into the earth. The carving is rough, done by a simple hand, but the words are known to every child. Red and white, in that land. It does not say a name. It does not say a date. It says only this: he promised one night, she gave him forever. Time is a river. It flows on, smoothing the sharpest rocks, wearing down the highest mountains. Decades passed. The West was tamed. The wildness was fenced in. But in the canyon, in the heart of the Dignita, an old woman sat in the sun outside her hogan. Her hogan, the one that faced the east, near the path to Red Mesa. Her skin was a beautiful map of her life, brown and wrinkled as a dried apple. Her hair, once the color of the sun, was now a long, shining river of pure silver. Her eyes, once the blue of the Boston sky, were faded, milky with age, but deep within them, the fire of the desert still burned. This was Evelyn Astza Neal, the grandmother of the canyon. She was never alone. She was surrounded by the children of the peace, the great-grandchildren of the ones she had saved. They were strong, healthy, and free. A small girl, her black hair shining, climbed into the old woman's lap. "Grandmother," she said, her voice soft, "tell us the story." Evelyn smiled, her voice a dry, soft rasp, like leaves in the wind. "Which story, little one? The story of the Spider-Woman, who taught us to weave?" "No," the girl said, her small hand reaching up to touch the silver pendant at Evelyn's throat. The pendant was worn smooth, the two rivers almost invisible, but it was never taken off. "Tell us the story of the Anai, the enemy." Evelyn's smile softened. "He was not Anai," she whispered, as she had whispered 10,000 times. "He was Dine. He was a warrior." "Tell us about the butcher," another boy called out. "The one with the scar?" She shook her head, her silver hair catching the light. "No, we do not speak his name. He is forgotten. He is nothing. He is dust." "Then tell us about the fathers," the little girl insisted, her black eyes bright. "Tell us about our fathers, who fought for this land." "Ah, yes," Evelyn said. "They were brave. Kay, your great-grandfather, he fought with the heart of a lion. Hastien, he had the wisdom of the mountains." "No, grandmother." The girl tugged on the pendant. "Tell us about him, the first father, the one the wind took." Evelyn's gaze drifted from the children. Looking past them, a man stood leaning against a cottonwood tree, watching the children, a gentle smile on his face. He was tall, his shoulders broad. He had her pale hair, now streaked with gray. But his eyes were his father's, black as the night, steady, and full of a quiet leader's strength. It was Tala, her son, the man who now led this village, the living bridge of two bloodlines. He saw her watching, and he nodded. Evelyn turned back to the children. "Yes," she breathed. "I will tell you of him. I will tell you of your father's father." She took a long, slow breath, pulling in the scent of juniper and dust. She began the story, as she always began it. The land was fire, Arizona in the year 1878. She told them of the girl from Boston. She told them of the warrior who had lost everything. She told them of the storm, of the flight, of the blood. She told them of the love that had rebuilt their world. The children listened, though they knew every word. It was their song. It was their history. As she spoke, the sun began to dip, painting the canyon walls in the familiar colors of blood and fire and passion. Her son, Tala, walked over and sat on the ground beside her chair. He took her small, gnarled hand in his. His was large, strong, the hand of a man who worked, who led. "You tell it well, mother," he said, his voice the low, smooth rumble she loved.
I tell it as it was,
she whispered. They sat, the old woman with the silver hair, and the strong man who was the proof of her life, the son of the Iron Snake, the son of the warrior, the two bloodlines, no longer at war, no longer two rivers, but one single, powerful ocean. They sat, and they watched the red sun set. A gust of wind, sudden and cool, swept up the canyon. It came from Red Mesa. It swirled around them, pulling at her hair, stirring the dust at her feet. Evelyn did not flinch. She did not shield her eyes. She turned her face into it, as she always did. She smiled, breathing it in. For one single impossible moment, the red light of the dying sun caught the swirling cloud of dust, the particles, the light, the wind. They came together. She saw him. He was standing in the sun, not a ghost, not a memory, but real. His hair was long and black. His shoulders were broad. He was not wounded. He was not an exile. He was whole. He was smiling at her, his eyes full of that fierce, tender love. Taji. Her old, frail heart gave a single, strong beat. The wind passed. The dust settled. The vision was gone. Evelyn's smile widened. A single tear, the first she had shed in 50 years, traced a clean path through the wrinkles on her ancient cheek. He was still here. He was waiting for her. "Mother," her son asked, his voice gentle, "are you cold?" She shook her head. She patted his strong hand.
"No, my son, I am warm."
The story was finished. The sun was gone. The sky was a deep, holy purple. From the village, from the center of the kiva, a sound began. A low, steady beat, a drum. Not a drum for war, not a drum for death, a drum for the harvest, a drum for peace, a drum for life. The wind sighed through the canyon, a long, soft breath. And in her own chest, Evelyn felt the slow, steady beat of her heart. The drum, the wind, the heartbeat. They were all the same. They were one. The West was wild, but their love was wilder and it never died. Thank you so much for listening to our story. I would love to know where you are all listening from. Please, drop a comment below. Let's connect and share our thoughts. And if you enjoyed this tale, I would be so grateful if you would subscribe to our channel, Wild West Tales. Give this video a like, and maybe even show your support by hitting that hype button. It helps get these stories out to more folks who need to hear them. Thank you again.